I got revenge on my cheating wife by seducing her affair partner's daughter and exposing their lies. Forecasting late spring weather in Pennsylvania is often difficult. This April, we saw unusual levels of rain and warmth. Normally, I'd wait until early to midday to cut the grass for the first time, but not this year. Although I had to start yard work early, I'm thankful it's not snowing. Last year at this time, we had a snowstorm that left 15 centimeters of snow, so I prefer the early mowing to dealing with snow any day. Also, with tax season over, it's nice to enjoy the sunshine outside. My home has a unique feature, a sharp drop in the backyard that leads to a small creek and woods. During building, they added fill to make the front of the house level with the street, creating a steep drop partway up the side. As a result, the basement, completely enclosed at the front, opens at the back. This design let me install a double door for services, ideal for storing my lawnmower and other garden tools without filling up the garage. It's one of the parts of the house I like most. After finishing the yard work and storing everything, I quickly went upstairs to take a shower. Allergies to grass make me eager to clean up. Climbing the stairs, I heard my wife's voice from the front of the house where I had been mowing. Seeing her friend's car, I expected to hear voices, but their conversation made me stop with my hand on the door handle. Let me introduce myself. I'm Robert Crane, but I go by Bob. In school, they called me Hogan, after Robert Crane, the actor in Hogan's Heroes. While I was okay with the nickname, the show was before my time, so it's not really a current reference. With a degree in accounting from the University of Pennsylvania, I quickly got my CPA and now lead audit teams at a well-known firm in Philadelphia. It's not the most exciting job, but it pays well and gives me insight into various businesses. My skill in forensic analytics, finding financial trails to expose fraud and money laundering, has made me a recognized expert. I've even worked with the FBI on 2 cases. My wife, Kelly, studied political science and business, with plans to go to law school. When we first met in our freshman year, I was sitting, waiting for class to start when she walked in. Kelly was tall and slim like a ballerina, but with a fuller chest. Her long strawberry blonde hair fell over her bare shoulders, a truly eye-catching sight. She wore a pretty sundress with sandals that showed off her beautiful legs, smooth and soft. Her mix of innocence and charm was very strong, instantly attracting me. Unfortunately, Kelly didn't sit next to me, nor was she in my group project. It took me 4 weeks to gather the courage to talk to her and start a conversation with a silly joke, which made her laugh loudly. We talked more, and I finally asked her to have coffee after class. "I've been waiting for you to ask that for 4 weeks, she answered with a smile. During our last 2 years of college, we were always together. Initially, our parents had doubts about us, but they accepted our relationship after seeing our strong commitment. I couldn't imagine things getting better, but they did. After graduation, I got a job at a well-known accounting firm in Philadelphia with a great salary for a 22-year-old just out of college. Kelly got into the University of Pennsylvania Law School, and we stayed in our college apartment. I also started my MBA, funded by my employer, and commuted to work on SEPTA, which saved us from needing a car and cut costs. 3 years later, Kelly finished law school, and I proposed at a birthday dinner at Morton's Steakhouse in Rittenhouse Square. We got married 6 months after that. Kelly began working as a deputy district attorney in Bucks County, north of Philadelphia. We bought a house in Doylestown, the county seat, with a courthouse and good train access, which made our commutes long but better than dealing with traffic on the Schuylkill Expressway or I-95. With her mom's help, Kelly found a good starter home with 3 bedrooms, one for an office with 2 desks, a guest room, and our main bedroom. Being close to her parents' house also made the location attractive, as Kelly saw it as a possible nanny solution when we started a family. As an only child who always wanted siblings, I was excited about this new phase. We had talked about having kids since our freshman year, and agreed to wait until Kelly was settled in her career. But finally, the time came, and 2 nights ago, we decided to stop Kelly's birth control to start trying for a baby. I was overjoyed. Then I heard something that made me stop, my hand on the door handle. "Hogan and I decided it was time for me to get pregnant," Kelly happily told her friend Olivia Watkins. Their loud, excited screams reminded me of the sad sight of whales accidentally beaching themselves on the Jersey Shore in their eager rush. Standing on the stairs, I smiled at their excitement, which matched my own as I looked forward to being a dad. As I went to grab the pen again, a comment broke my happiness. "This is wonderful, Kel," Olivia remarked. "But what about Paul, the situation downstairs?" "Hush," Kelly quickly replied. "Hogan is outside mowing the lawn." After a short pause, I imagined her looking around, expecting me to be nearby. Then she added, "I've already told Paul that I'm ending the affair. He understands." With G-Man retiring as senator, Paul sees a chance for himself. Being caught in an affair with a married staffer wouldn't look good. It's really that straightforward. 3 sentences shattered my world. Paul Evans, Kelly's boss at the DA's office, was a 40-year-old widower with a daughter named Barbara. His wife, Anne, had died of breast cancer, making him a single dad. Paul was deeply involved in politics, and Kelly often shared stories about his political tactics to climb higher. "So you're just quitting like that? You've been involved for 6 months, and now you're just stopping?" Olivia's doubtful tone angered me. She was a former classmate from Penn State, someone I knew before Kelly. Despite Kelly and Olivia's close friendship, I thought Olivia was still my friend. It seems I was wrong. "Stop it," Kelly laughed, brushing off Olivia's teasing. "You're terrible." Paul was intense, but he was too much for me. I love Hogan, and I want to stay true and committed as we start our family. How many more stereotypes are we going to joke about? I had a thought. All I need for complete happiness is to come home, see an unknown car in the driveway, and find them together in my bed. I wanted to storm into the room, yelling, destroying everything. But I was stuck, shocked, my heart pounding in my ears. "Quitting just like that?" Olivia asked, leading to another laugh from Kelly. "Not exactly," she admitted. "I have a conference with Paul in Pittsburgh next week. That will be our goodbye. I'll miss the closeness, but Hogan and the baby are my priorities. I couldn't take it anymore, but I didn't know what to do. I care a lot about Kelly, yet this was tearing me apart." My business mind kicked in. I needed to step back and think strategically. As I walked up the stairs, I considered my options. I opened the door and walked into the kitchen. Kelly and Olivia were there drinking tea. Was that guilt on Kelly's face? "Honey, are you okay?" she asked, her voice full of concern. It was then I noticed tears on my face. "Allergies," I said quietly. "Looks like it's going to be a tough spring. Let me go up and clean up." "Just leave those clothes by the bathroom. I'll handle them right away so they don't crowd your closet. Remember, I bought you a new pack of Claritin D last week. It's in the medicine cabinet." "Thanks," I managed to say, heading to the stairs. I needed some space to think. The next morning, Monday came, and I left for an early meeting before Kelly woke up, using it as an excuse to avoid her. Last night, I said I went to bed early because of allergies, hiding my real feelings. Sitting in the car, I thought about what I had learned. On one hand, my wife had cheated, but it seemed over, on just a physical level. Some might say I should be okay with this, happy that she plans to be a devoted wife and mom now. However, I keep wondering if she'll cheat again. Could there be more hidden meetings, leading to a divorce where Kelly gets the kids and I end up with the financial stress? As an accountant and business analyst, I'm used to weighing risks and benefits, and I see this situation in the same way. My trust in Kelly is broken. To dismiss her actions as just physical misses the main point. She showed no respect for me as her partner. A cheater knows they are hurting their spouse, otherwise they would be honest from the beginning. While I might never get over her affair with Paul, if she had told me herself, it would have at least shown some respect. Kelly's behavior showed how little she values me. Though I was at work physically, my mind was busy figuring out what to do next. Besides overhearing that talk, I had no proof, nor had I noticed any different behavior over the past 6 months when she was supposedly cheating. Confronting her without evidence could be pointless and wouldn't help much. Kelly would deny everything. Paul Evans would deny everything. Taking any legal steps would be financially ruinous, as every judge, politician, and lawyer nearby knew Evans. I would have faced huge challenges in clearing my name. The idea of moving and starting over came to mind, but our house was a problem, making it hard to leave. Kelly couldn't pay for it alone with her salary, and we didn't have much equity. Trying to sell the house quickly to prevent foreclosure seemed unlikely given the current market. Such a step would hurt our credit scores, which is especially bad for a CPA looking for a job. It's tough to be trusted with other people's money when you can't handle your own. I needed solid proof before making any moves. I believed I could gather evidence, but it unexpectedly came from an unlikely source 3 days later. Despite my efforts, I found no supporting evidence. Kelly's personal laptop yielded nothing, and no incriminating items were found hidden away. Then Kelly called, inviting us to a political announcement party at Paul Evans's house on Friday night. I assumed it would be his Senate candidacy announcement, yet I still lacked proof. Frustrated, we arrived at Evans's lavish mansion near Washington Crossing, complete with a backyard horse farm and a large tent for guests. As we entered, there stood Paul Evans, arrogantly greeting guests as if he were royalty. As a widower, Evans lacked a wife to fulfill hostess duties, so he clearly enlisted his 21-year-old daughter for the role. She stood beside him, greeting guests as if it were second nature. When our turn came, Evans beamed at Kelly, saying, "Kelly, you've done it!" How wonderful. He gave my wife a chaste kiss on the cheek before turning to me. "Robert, good to see you again. I'd be lost without your wife, but it seems I'll have to give her up soon when you start expanding your family." He chuckled at his own jest. "Just give her back when you're done and no hard feelings." More laughter ensued. Kelly blushed slightly, and I wanted to throttle the grinning fool. I caught his hint, which he seemed to think flew over my head. "Who knows what the future holds," I replied, tone flat and neutral, neither hostile nor friendly, mirroring how I delivered the audit results. Evans flushed a bit, and Kelly nudged me, murmuring something about being impolite. Smoothly moving on to the next guest, Evans left us alone with his daughter. Kelly was undeniably beautiful, but Barbara Evans was breathtaking. Even in my simmering anger, I couldn't help but notice her auburn hair and radiant smile evoked thoughts of a young Maureen O'Hara. If Kelly resembled a voluptuous ballerina, Barbara looked like she belonged on a swimsuit calendar alongside Kate Upton. She possessed the kind of beauty, physique, hair, and skin that photographers dreamed of, and often had to enhance with Photoshop. Paul Evans had the quintessential political family, a triple threat. He appeared tailor-made for the roles of wise statesman and family man. Losing his wife to cancer provided him with the perfect spouse, idolized by all, with any detractor risking career destruction. Barbara was a princess, former prom queen, business and law student at Penn State, former gymnast, and now a cheerleader for the university. According to Kelly, Barbara planned to audition for the Eagles cheerleading squad at the next open competition, having just turned 21. With a saintly late mother and a smart, beautiful, photogenic daughter, the press would eat it up on the campaign trail. "Robert!" Barbara exclaimed in an excited tone, embracing me tightly. This wasn't a mere polite hug, it was a full-bodied squeeze, with parts of her pressed against me in the most delightful manner. "You look fantastic. No wonder Kelly's been keeping you all to herself. You never show up to any of our gatherings. You shouldn't overwork yourself, it's not good for your health." Somehow, she managed to say it all in one breath. In less than a second, my fury gave way to utter astonishment. I offered a few polite compliments about her appearance and was about to depart when two realizations struck me. Firstly, Barbara never greeted Kelly. Secondly, what parties was she referring to? Before I could inquire, Kelly swooped in with her own greeting for Barbara, and we had no choice but to yield to the next guests in line. As Kelly and I found a spot to relax, I pondered what Barbara might know. After fixing my wife a drink, I inquired, "What parties was Barbara mentioning?" Kelly simply smiled and waved it off. "She's just teasing, that little brat. Sometimes Paul holds team meetings and strategy sessions here. He claims he thinks better with a drink in hand, and you never know who might be nearby at a bar. Barbara was home a few times when we gathered here. Don't spread it around, but Paul let her have a drink at home before she turned 21. That set my mind racing. This scoundrel might have had carnal relations with my wife right here in his home under the pretext of business meetings. These could even pass as actual meetings, where Kelly was the last to leave. Or perhaps she left first and returned after everyone else had departed, preventing suspicion from arising about why she always lingered behind to help her boss tidy up. With his wife deceased and his daughter off at college, he had no need for a discreet hotel room, hence leaving no trace of their encounters. "So, Barbara attends your team meetings?" I inquired. Kelly brushed off the query. "No, she was home on a few occasions when her classes were canceled. She's just poking fun at her dad for partying during work hours." She tugged at my hand. "Come on, honey, let's get your young wife a drink." For the next hour, Kelly stuck close to my side. We conversed with some of her colleagues, and a few brought up our plans to start a family, expressing both sadness at potentially losing Kelly for a while and joy for our future. Frankly, I felt a tad embarrassed. How did all these people know about our plans? An hour later, Paul Evans called for everyone's attention, his daughter beaming beside him. He began by thanking everyone for coming, then proceeded to announce his major campaign. Though anticipated, the news stirred excitement among the attendees. I observed the local newspaper publisher alongside one of his reporters, undoubtedly jotting down notes for tomorrow's headline. I'll spare you the other party particulars. It would have been enjoyable if my heart wasn't in pieces and my mind racing to find proof. About 90 minutes after the grand announcement, Margaret Williamson, the first assistant district attorney, entered, announcing Paul's desire to meet with his staff. While Paul held an elected position, Margaret served as the office's senior manager, essentially overseeing its operations. While prosecutors rotated every 4 years, Margaret remained a constant presence, revered for her integrity in the legal community. Kelly had taken the job primarily because of her. I held great respect for her. She had been married for over 3 decades to an electrician who had supported her through college and now owned a successful electrical contracting company. The couple was deeply committed to each other, serving as role models for Kelly and me. "Sorry for stealing your wife, Hogan," Margaret quipped. "Paul wants to discuss office organization once he wraps up campaigning." With that, they departed, leaving the gathering of remaining spouses. I sought solace on the far side of the expansive pool, opposite the patio where the party buzzed. A wicker swing chair hung from chains in the shadow, providing a secluded spot for contemplation. Barely 5 minutes into my solitude, I was interrupted by a voice. "So this is where you're hiding," Barbara purred as she slid into the swing beside me. She positioned herself to face me, her little black dress clinging to her tan hips, suggesting allure while maintaining an air of innocence. It's telling of my state of mind that I noted this observation almost clinically. "You seem burdened," she remarked. I hesitated to discuss this with my wife's lover's daughter, no matter how attractive she was. "We've been swamped with office work. Lots of audits," I offered, hoping to steer the conversation elsewhere. "Is it true?" Barbara inquired with genuine interest. "I just wrapped up my final accounting course at university. We covered forensic accounting and law enforcement. I found it fascinating," I shared, even surprising myself amidst the grief. "Really?" I questioned incredulously. "It may not sound glamorous, but essentially it's like being a detective, piecing together information from various sources to uncover the truth, especially when people try to hide it." "Not everyone sees it that way," I admitted. Barbara delved into the details of what she had learned in class and why she found it captivating. I must admit I was impressed. I've encountered interns at firms who couldn't articulate themselves as well on the subject. Focusing on her words helped me push aside her appearance, and more importantly, the simmering anger within me. I found myself embracing the role of mentor, which helped dim the emotional turmoil. "You really enjoyed the course," I observed. "You seem to have a solid grasp of the topic." Barbara blushed momentarily at the compliment. The sultry pin-up persona faded, revealing a genuinely touched young woman. "I actually considered joining the FBI. But after school, Dad wants me to either pursue prosecution or join one of his friend's law firms. I'm not sure if that's what I want," she confided. "You should pursue your own aspirations, not your father's," I advised. Honestly, though, I wasn't opposed to disrupting that idiot's plans. I've had some experience with the FBI when audits uncovered criminal activity. "They're sharp individuals," I added. Before Barbara could respond, suddenly Kelly emerged from the shadows. "So this is where you've been. No funny business," she teased. Barbara turned to my wife with a bright smile. "We were just discussing Bob's work. It came up in our class discussion," she explained. "Well, that's Hogan for you," Kelly remarked proudly. "I remember one audit report where an employee embezzled using their boss's login. Hogan discovered that some transfers occurred while the guy was on a business trip, but the login originated from the corporate office. Most people would have stopped once the boss was implicated. Hogan kept digging. I could have nailed the employee on my first day as a lawyer. Hogan left the prosecutors with nothing to do on the case," Kelly recounted, beaming at me. This left me utterly bewildered. How could she be proud of me and profess her love while carrying on a 6-month affair with her damn boss? Seeing my expression, Kelly asked, "What's wrong, dear?" "Nothing," I replied, "just pondering." "Well, stop it." "It's a party," Kelly scolded. She barely paused before adding, "Hogan, you'll never guess what opportunity I've been offered. Paul and Margaret want me to handle some administrative tasks as I prepare for maternity leave once your project is completed. This way there won't be any loose ends when I'm gone. I'll be working directly under Margaret." My heart skipped a beat at the thought of Kelly being away from that idiot Paul, but in the next moment my hopes were dashed. "I'll have to travel occasionally," Kelly continued. "I'll be delivering important documents to Paul during the campaign, so I won't be actively involved, but I'll get to witness some behind-the-scenes action. It's going to be so exciting." Once again, my heart shattered. While Kelly had mentioned ending the affair to start a family, I couldn't shake the fear of her straying again, especially with the allure of the campaign trail. If she becomes pregnant, who's to say it'll be my child? Paul is roughly my size and complexion. Without a DNA test, it would be challenging to ascertain. My anger began to stir, but I quelled it. Now wasn't the time. Barbara engaged Kelly in conversation about her new role in the campaign, leaving me sidelined. I seized the chance to compose myself. After tonight, I'll start strategizing. I needed to somehow counteract Paul's political sway, though frankly I had no clue how to do it. 2 days later, the solution arrived at my office. "Your 4000 meeting is here," my administrator announced. Checking my calendar, I found no bookings. Before I could respond, Barbara entered. "Hey Hogan," she greeted, her long auburn hair cascading over her shoulders. She wore a light sundress that accentuated her legs, with strappy sandals reaching almost to her knees. Her bosom was discreetly covered, yet the fabric hinted at allure. 2 thin straps upheld the dress, leaving her arms bare. I was speechless as she entered. "I hope you don't mind," Barbara began, shutting the door behind her. "I told Mary we had a meeting to discuss my career and Kelly's employment with my father." Politely, I rose from my chair. "Glad to see you, just working on some reports," I said, gesturing for her to take a seat. After she sat, I followed suit. "What's on your mind?" The cheerful expression vanished from Barbara's face. "I think you know, Bob. I saw it when you talked to my father. I'm truly sorry he's tarnishing such a good guy." I was shocked. This wasn't what I anticipated. "What do you mean?" I inquired cautiously. Barbara disclosed the news about my father's affair with my wife in a blunt manner. I leaned back in my chair at the stark revelation. "Did you recently find out?" Barbara asked softly. I nodded. "I'm truly sorry. How? When did you learn?" I questioned. "About 3 months ago," Barbara confessed. "I'm not sure when it began, but I discovered it on February 1st. I came home early that Friday and stumbled upon one of their rendezvous at our house. I had been out for lunch with a friend from school and stopped by to drop off some items and say hello. Dad inquired when I'd be back, and I said after dinner. It turned out my friend fell ill and couldn't join me. After having a snack, I returned home where I witnessed Dad and Kelly engaging in carnal activity in our jacuzzi. I captured photos and even filmed them running undressed into the house. There was a foot of snow on the ground." "Did you take pictures of your father having physical engaging?" I asked in shock. I also pondered whether I could obtain copies of the photos, which would be extremely useful in a divorce. As if anticipating my thoughts, Barbara reached into her bag, retrieved a large envelope, and placed it on my desk. "Here are pictures from that day and several others," she said, pausing. She grinned. "Dad installed a security system in the house. The entire exterior and several interior rooms are monitored. If you know the website and have the key fob and password, you can access it from almost anywhere. There's also a flash drive with video recordings." I was taken aback by this. Paul's daughter provided me with everything necessary to divorce and discredit her father. "Why?" I asked. The sorrowful expression on Barbara's face turned to anger as she quietly replied, "I despise him more than you ever could." I remained silent, waiting for her to speak. After a moment, she began. "Dad met Mom when she was a college student. He was an aspiring lawyer assigned to the Physical Engaging Crimes Unit in Philadelphia. Mom came to study from Ireland. Her family was wealthy but perished in the London dairy bombing. She came here to escape the chaos." Her voice softened, likely inherited from her mother. "Mom was dating some loser who slapped her so hard she ended up in intensive care." Kelly paused and placed a thick book adorned with greenery and lace on my table. "I found her diary after she passed, and she was somewhat of a submissive lover. She enjoyed being commanded by a strong man. This idiot went too far, and she ended up in the hospital. My father was tasked with handling the situation. They met, he went to jail, and a year later they married. My father was always ambitious. He landed a smart, beautiful woman with an exotic accent. Mom found a protector in him. I came along a few years later. Dad wanted me to pursue gymnastics. He thought having a daughter compete in the Olympics would boost his political career. Do you know how most gymnasts' careers end?" I shook my head, admitting I never considered it. Barbara grinned. "They call it the 3BS, bosom, backside, and boys. I got the first one. I was pushed into cheerleading to embody the all-American girl. I didn't mind. I enjoyed performing, but by age 16 I realized I was merely a pawn in my father's ambitions. Mom knew from the start Dad had affairs almost immediately after they wed. Mom knew and pleaded with him to stop, but she was too powerless to act. She felt trapped. Being a devout Catholic, divorce was out of the question." Barbara paused, and I allowed her a moment to gather her thoughts. After a beat, she continued, "Sometimes I wonder if her poor response to cancer treatment stemmed from a subconscious desire to die or active sabotage of her treatment. Anyway, I was by her side in the hospital when she passed. Officially, Dad went to court and won a liquidation case. He coerced the doctor into altering the time of end of life. In reality, he celebrated by having physical engaging with his assistant in her apartment. He paraded Mom as a trophy, and the press adored the story of their meeting, a heroic prosecutor rescuing a misused woman. Damn, that idiot himself misused her more than once, and I witnessed it. "Why are you telling me all this?" I had to ask, feeling undeserving of her revelations. "Hogan, my father, he's not a very good man. After my mother passed, he concealed his affairs until I left for college. Then he began hosting meetings at home and elsewhere, not just for work, but also for some charity groups he's involved with. I know for a fact he's involved with 2 other women from these groups. One poor woman genuinely believes it's true love and plans to leave her husband. Is this what Kelly's considering? I queried, though I grasped the gravity of what I'd heard. Curiosity still nagged at me. Barbara shook her head. No, she sees it as just fun. They say power is the ultimate aphrodisiac. Kelly seems to be living proof of that. I overheard her discussing some senator they were meeting with my dad. So, hun, your goal here? I inquired. To her credit, Barbara met my gaze squarely as she replied, I want you to end your marriage with this betrayer. I want my father's career to be demolished to the point where he couldn't be elected dog catcher in a town full of cats. I've considered just sending my evidence to the newspapers or even the opposing party, but he has too many allies. I believe together we can make them pay. Won't it complicate your schooling? She tossed her auburn hair. No, my mother left me her inheritance as a trust fund. I haven't touched it, but if need be, I could cover the rest of my tuition and MBA and still have a comfortable cushion left. If your mother had so much money, why didn't she leave with you? She could have gone to Ireland where your father couldn't reach. Barbara winced. She was raised Irish Catholic. Divorce was never an option. Despite everything, my mother clung to her faith until the end. That's the only reason I think her end of life was unintentional, as destruction is deemed unforgivable. I found Barbara's truthfulness undeniable. She expressed her desire to ruin her father's career, and my possession of this information didn't bode well for his aspirations. I didn't suspect it to be a trap. If Kelly and Paul wanted to ruin me, they could do so openly in court. This sort of scheme was reserved for the desperate like me. A plan began to take shape in my mind. I needed Barbara's assistance with a few matters. At the very least, it would gauge her commitment to destroying her father. All right, I consented. But I don't want to destroy him by releasing these photos or even naming him in the divorce. Barbara looked surprised. Why not? She demanded, her face flushing with fervor, ready to launch into a speech. I halted her with a raised hand. I'm not saying we won't ruin him, but I'd rather avoid the negative press of a betrayed husband in a political scandal. Instead, I want to dismantle what he strived for all his life, erode his power and influence. And I can achieve a smooth, low-profile divorce without causing any concern. Barbara gazed at me in shock. A minute later, a cunning smile crept onto her face. What's your request? I grinned. I'll do what I excel at. Get me his financial records, personal and campaign-related. They nailed Capone on tax evasion. Having met your father, I'm confident I'll find something. And if not, she inquired. I smiled. I have another plan. For the next 3 days, Barbara and I were occupied. She installed a keystroke recorder on her father's personal laptop and home computer, also backing up his hard drive. We configured their security system to sync records to a cloud space I controlled, located abroad. As for me, I refrained from monitoring Kelly's phone. With Barbara's evidence, I didn't require anything else. I activated a GPS tracker intended for parental use, primarily relying on cell towers for location unless I initiated GPS activation. I simply didn't want her interrupting me at home while I worked. The day after Barbara's initial visit, I faked a groin injury as an excuse to avoid closeness with my wife. After learning about Paul's numerous partners, I wasn't willing to take any more risks than I unknowingly had. Plus, I doubted I could do it without my anger erupting. I also scheduled an appointment with the doctor for STI testing. Initially, nothing was detected, but some, like HIV, can take months to register antibodies. Kelly departed for the Pittsburgh conference, her excitement tinged with irritation. It was no surprise, she looked forward to the trip. Yet despite everything, a part of me still loved her. I could never trust her again, but my feelings remained. However, the thought of being carnal with her after what I discovered was unbearable. On Thursday morning, Kelly, packed and ready, awaited Paul and the junior lawyer joining them for the conference. I wondered if the young man knew he was their cover. I'll be back Sunday afternoon, Kelly informed me after dropping her bag by the front door. Seated at the table, I sipped my coffee with my back to her. She embraced me from behind, her lips close to my ear. I hope you'll feel better so we can focus on the baby, she whispered, her voice stirring memories of happier times. I fought back tears, managing to compose myself. I'll apply ice to speed up the healing, I assured her, stroking her hand and kissing her forehead. She murmured. I wish I didn't have to leave. It'd be better to stay home with you and be undressed all weekend. You could always tell Evans something important came up, I suggested spontaneously, sensing a shift in her tone as she regarded me. What's your issue with Paul? She asked incredulously. You seemed rude at the party and now you speak as if you despise him. I forced myself to calm down, shrugging. Honestly, I've seen too many arrogant idiots like Evans who think they're untouchable and the epitome of power. They're big fish in small ponds, peddling the illusion of power and manipulating people into believing it. Like that mayor in South Carolina last year. Big shot embezzled city funds and slept with 3 married women. Now he's in federal prison for 10 years and they're all divorced and publicly shamed. Evans gives off the same vibe. If he gets to Washington, he'll be preying on clueless interns within a week, but eventually his facade will crumble. And when it does, I wouldn't want to be caught in the fallout. Kelly gazed at me, taken aback. While I'd ranted about such individuals before, I'd never linked Evans with them until now. Perhaps I should have kept quiet, but releasing those feelings felt cathartic. Despite the end of our marriage, I believed it was fair to warn Kelly that I still harbored love for her, even though trust was irreparably broken. "Hogan, that's awful what you said about Paul," Kelly objected. "He's a good person who's done a lot for this district." "He's not like that." I detected a pleading undertone in her denial. Unexpectedly, the sound of a car horn outside interrupted us. "Paul's here." Kelly sighed in frustration. She shot me a look that swiftly transformed from remorse to fear. "I'll be back in 4 days," Kelly said conciliatorily. "We can discuss it then, but brace yourself, love. We have a child to focus on." She embraced me, kissing me fervently. I reciprocated with equal passion. "Have a good week," she whispered. "I love you." "I love you too," I replied. She grabbed her bag and opened the front door. "Goodbye, dear," she called over her shoulder. "Farewell, Kelly," I responded before closing the door. 30 minutes later, I departed by train for the city, where Barbara and I had an appointment with the FBI. As it turned out, I didn't need to gather any evidence. I'd rate Paul Evans's embezzlement tactics as moderately clever. Barbara and I convened at her off-campus apartment to scrutinize the documents she'd extracted from his computer. Overall, his methods were fairly standard. I estimated he had about $2 million tucked away in an offshore account, at least according to the transfers. However, I couldn't confirm if it still existed, as those records weren't included. Much of this money came from small donors unlikely to attract IRS attention. But why were out-of-state individuals donating to the DA's campaign? I managed to trace some to defendants whose cases had been dismissed or had received unusually lenient plea agreements. However, Barbara unearthed the biggest bombshell. Turns out she wasn't Evans's only child. Along the way, he fathered children with 2 other women. One was born 3 years before his wife's end of life, with his mother being one of his employees at the time. The 3rd child, born 8 months after his wife's passing, was from an 18-year-old hospital volunteer. Evans compensated each woman $2,000 a month as campaign consultants for poll research. Barbara nearly wrecked her apartment in a fit of rage. That fiery red hair was quite the warning sign. By the time Kelly and Paul departed, we had combed through everything in Paul's records. Some questions lingered, but we lacked the resources to delve further, so I documented my findings and arranged a meeting with the senior FBI agent I collaborated with in the Philadelphia office. Barbara accompanied me to recount the fabricated tale we'd concocted. She claimed that after taking a forensic accounting course, she wanted to examine real documents and innocently decided to peruse her father's notes. Upon noticing discrepancies, she contacted me due to my wife's employment with her father and my experience in the field. Gary was a seasoned pro, sensing there was more to it, but we handed him a wrapped gift to avoid further inquiry. A corrupt prosecutor in his backyard now aiming for a Senate seat, this career boost felt heaven-sent. Barbara had a late class, so we hailed a cab to her place, and I walked to 30th Street Station for the train home. Thoughts of packing and leaving crossed my mind when Kelly returned. Gary pledged to expedite the case, aiming to subpoena Evans's documents by Wednesday. Once the investigation leaked, the idiot would realize his power was ephemeral as his allies abandoned ship. Kelly called during my train ride home, citing a late dinner and likely absence from her room tonight. Sensing my distraction, she probed, and I vaguely mentioned an FBI meeting, citing ongoing investigation constraints. "This case seems to weigh on you," she remarked, seeking hints. Succumbing to temptation, I hinted at corrupt politicians, bribery, money laundering, and scandalous affairs. "Oh, you're no fun," she pouted. "Don't worry, love. Your secret's safe," I assured her. Upon returning home, I sat in awe. A decade-long marriage was ending. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt like a spectator, watching my life fade away. Hours passed before I stirred from my reverie, realizing I needed a change. Ironically, as I mowed the lawn, a BMW pulled up. Watching Barbara emerge, her statuesque legs wrapped in sandals reminiscent of ancient Greece, caught my eye. Her toga-like dress, semi-sheer and clinging to her curves, accentuated her allure. Long red hair framed her face, but it was her gray-green eyes and warm smile that captivated me as she approached. I shut off the engine and greeted her. "Looking better than I expected," Barbara remarked. "I half expected to find you drowning in a bottle or contemplating a ledge." I chuckled. "Last night I entertained thoughts of both, but it had to be done," I explained. "And it serves as a distraction." "Have you seen a lawyer?" she inquired. I shrugged. "Met with one on Tuesday before they left. Documents will be ready Monday. Agreed to audit a client in Austin. Leave Tuesday and stay the full 3 weeks instead of my usual remote work." I shrugged again. It might seem like avoiding, but I'd rather not be around when the chaos erupts. Barbara nodded knowingly. She understood the attention it would draw as the daughter of that man. "It's good you're planning ahead," she acknowledged. "It's what you're good at." She grinned. "Now I can plan too." "All right, here's my plan," Barbara announced. "I'll help you wrap up your work here, then you'll join me, have some fun, maybe even get a little wild. I've got a swimsuit you'll adore." I tried to protest. "I'm still married," I pointed out, "and I don't think I'll be ready for anything anytime soon." "You need to blow off some steam before you blow a gasket," she insisted, with a mischievous twinkle in her eye. "And besides, you know what they say, what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander." Her gaze was teasing yet sincere. I couldn't help but laugh. In a twist of fate, we bumped into Olivia after finishing the yard work. After freshening up, we headed to a nice restaurant for a late lunch. I wasn't in the mood for revenge, physically engaging, but it felt good to step out, especially with someone as sweet as Barbara. Approaching the restaurant, I spotted Olivia's car parked outside. I almost suggested to Barbara that we find another place, but I didn't. Instead, I did something totally out of character. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision. Despite all my careful planning, something inside me snapped when I saw Olivia's car in that parking lot. Casually, I embraced the red-haired beauty and guided her into the restaurant. Without much ado, I slipped the owner a tip to ensure we were seated at a specific table, somewhat secluded but still visible from certain angles. Seated, I positioned Barbara to face outward and took a seat beside her, holding her hand. "What's this about?" she asked with a sweet smile. "Not that I'm complaining." I chuckled. "Remember how I told you about finding out about my wife's affair? About her friend Olivia? Well, her car is parked right out there." Barbara erupted into laughter. "So I'm the other woman? Well, I can handle that," she joked, leaning forward to give me a soft kiss on the lips, a promise of more to come. Our food arrived, and I found myself thoroughly enjoying the moment, forgetting all about the impromptu setup as I relished Barbara's company and her witty banter. "I've never heard counting sound so naughty," she quipped, making me laugh. Glancing back, I spotted Olivia walking past us. I pointed it out to Barbara. "Oh my God," she giggled. "This is too good," leaning in for another kiss. I felt my hand instinctively move under the table, resting on Barbara's leg. Her skin was incredibly soft, her muscles firm yet elastic. The touch sent shivers down my spine, and I was lost in the moment until Olivia's sudden outburst cut through the air. "Hogan, what the hell are you doing?" she yelled, drawing everyone's attention. "And who's this BTT you're flaunting while your wife's away? I expected better from you." I released Barbara's hand and turned to face my ex-girlfriend. "What's your problem, Liv?" "It's just a little carefree physical engaging before Kelly and I settle down and have a baby." "And could you keep it down?" "People are trying to eat," I said, trying to brush off Olivia's shocked expression. "What?" she began, clearly taken aback. "Oh, come on, Liv, Kelly does the same. I'm sure she's having fun with her boss right now, and she's been at it for months, so I figured it was only fair that I seduced the boss's daughter." Olivia looked like she was about to have a heart attack. Sensing Barbara starting to giggle, I gently squeezed her hand to quiet her. "You know about—" Olivia stuttered. "I know that I must be a faithful, clueless husband while my wife runs around with the help of a woman I considered a close friend," I retorted with disdain. Olivia winced at the contempt in my voice. "I know Kelly wanted to try something else one last time before having a baby, like that last fling before the wedding. If it was normal for her, what do you have against me?" I had no evidence of Kelly having affairs before Paul, but once a cheater, always a cheater, as they say. I threw my suspicion out there, wondering if Olivia was unstable enough to confirm it. She did. "You know about this too?" she sighed. "No, but thanks for the confirmation," I replied. Olivia paled at this. "Go away, Olivia," I said firmly. She turned and hurried away from the table. A few minutes later, we heard a commotion. It was Olivia leaving the restaurant. "Well, it was fun while it lasted," Barbara said with a slight laugh. I really wanted her to stick around longer. Her smile made me blush. You know she's probably on the phone with your wife right now, she added. Perhaps, I agreed. I give her 5 minutes before my phone starts ringing. But if she left now, it's a 5-hour drive back home from Pittsburgh. That gives us time for dessert and for me to pack up and head home. It's a shame I won't get to see you in that bikini you promised. Barbara laughed again. Oh well, maybe another time. She reached out and grabbed my shirt, pulling me closer. You know my semester ends in a week and a half, she murmured in my ear. I've always wanted to see Austin. Her words barely registered as her tongue slipped into my ear. Kelly started calling me 10 minutes after Olivia left the restaurant. I listened to a few of her enraged messages, almost finding it comical. After an hour of her relentless messages and texts, I blocked her number. I knew she might call from another phone eventually, but she was driving back from Pittsburgh, unable to simply borrow someone else's phone on the highway. When I got home, I packed up all my personal belongings, not just what I needed for the trip to Austin. I had time. 4 hours after encountering Olivia, I departed from my home, possibly for the final time. After securing a hotel room near the Philadelphia airport, I placed most of my belongings in storage until I secured permanent accommodations. I had several phone conversations with Barbara, who was out walking with a friend due to her father bombarding her with angry messages. I rescheduled my flight to Austin for the following day and departed on Monday morning. Despite Kelly's repeated calls from different numbers, filled with tearful accusations about how I had ruined her life and career, I remained resolute. Olivia's initial outburst drew attention, leading to a comment on a blog that accurately depicted Barbara and me as players in the unfolding drama. My remark about Kelly's involvement with Paul during their weekend in Pittsburgh stirred controversy within the county's political and legal circles. For the rest of the week, I avoided most news from Philadelphia. It wasn't until Friday that I received a letter from Margaret, a senior manager in the DA's office, surprisingly apologizing for the ordeal. Margaret acknowledged Paul's extramarital affairs, but claimed ignorance about Kelly's involvement. She commended me for using legal means to seek retribution against the lawyer. The following week in the DA's office was tumultuous, with Paul attempting to deflect blame onto his daughter's rebellion influenced by her unfaithful husband. However, his arrest on Tuesday, followed by dramatic scenes at the courthouse, changed the narrative. In her letter, Margaret recounted how Paul was arrested during a meeting in his office, shocking everyone present. He was swiftly taken into custody and paraded past reporters. Margaret expressed regret for the turmoil and offered assistance, acknowledging my undeserved predicament. While part of her letter seemed aimed at damage control, I believed Margaret's sincerity stemmed from her moral and professional integrity. My plans for a discreet divorce were shattered by my impulsive encounter with Olivia. Paul's arrest garnered media attention, turning our story into headline news characterized by romance, betrayal, and revenge. Thankfully, being out of town shielded me from the worst of the media frenzy. Moreover, booking a separate hotel room further obscured my whereabouts, frustrating attempts to track me down. However, upon checking in, I noticed reporters stationed around the hotel, hoping to catch a glimpse of me. On TV, I saw them camped outside my house, filming my relatives coming and going while Kelly remained indoors. Barbara faced the harshest scrutiny. As the daughter who betrayed her father, despite having to attend classes and take exams, she became an easy target for the media in the initial days. Eventually, the school intervened, forcing reporters off campus for disturbing students. Additionally, 2 women who had children with Paul sought their 15 minutes of fame, adding to the media frenzy. With her final exams completed, Barbara quietly slipped away from campus and headed to the airport. Disappointed but not entirely surprised, the media missed her absence from the graduation ceremony. As time passed, the story receded to the sidelines, resurfacing only when Paul's trial began. His guilty plea resulted in a 20-year federal sentence, sparing Barbara and me from testifying. Subsequently, the case faded from public attention, taking Barbara, Kelly, and me with it. Surprisingly, my divorce proceeded swiftly and without much drama. Kelly signed the papers and 4 days later sent a letter expressing remorse for her actions. She acknowledged her hypocrisy upon learning of her own infidelity and requested a meeting to apologize in person when circumstances permitted. She ended by expressing eternal love and good wishes before relocating to the Midwest to live with her aunt. My involvement in uncovering Paul's crimes elevated my career, earning me recognition from the FBI for analyzing his tapes. Embracing anonymity from the media, I excelled in my work in Austin, identifying not only the sought-after embezzler, but also a second perpetrator, unknown at the time. My firm promoted me to lead the white-collar crime team, affectionately dubbed Hogan's Heroes by some. Working late became enjoyable, especially with the company of my new assistant, a recent college graduate eager to gain experience in forensic accounting. And that bikini looked even better strewn across the floor of my hotel room.
Wife cheated, used burner phone, got kicked out, affair partner jailed, she's jobless. I started dating my first real girlfriend during COVID in 2020. I'll call her Sonia. We actually met at the grocery store because I held the door open for her. It was a small act of kindness, but it led to a brief conversation about the challenges of grocery shopping during the pandemic. And not even just grocery shopping, but life in general, as most of us know. Her smile was warm, and her eyes sparkled with the kind of light that made the gray, stressful atmosphere of that time feel a little brighter. I say real because it was really my first serious relationship. Back in 2020, I was the young sprout of 23. Sonia was a couple of years older than me and working as a nurse. Her dedication and passion for her job were evident from the start, and it was one of the things I admired most about her. Despite the chaos of the pandemic, she always found time to listen to my worries and offer comfort. Her empathy and strength were like a rock I would cling to amidst the storm. It was honestly one of the worst times, but she made life feel good and bright, if that makes sense. We both weren't alone, we each had each other. We watched each other hit rock bottom, me losing a job, her dealing with work at the time, but we had each other. She had this infectious enthusiasm for life that drew me in. Whether we were talking about her favorite books, sharing music, or just walking in the park, she made everything feel special. I fell in love with her kindness, her intelligence, and the way she would make even the most mundane moments feel magical. She had a quirky sense of humor that never failed to make me laugh, even on my worst days. She had this incredible ability to make me feel seen and understood in a way no one else ever had. And here I am today, still trying to process everything that happened between us and where things went wrong. It comes in waves. Writing this down is supposed to help, and maybe it will. At the very least, it's a chance to remember the good times and honor what we had. So, it sort of started right before our 1-year anniversary. She came home from work one night, and I had this awful gut feeling that I'd never felt before. The energy between us was all off. She was supposed to come over after work, but tried to bail. She had come from work totally exhausted before and had bailed on me other days because of the hard days at the hospital, which I totally understood. But that day just felt different. Normally, when Sonia was too tired to see me, she'd still call or text with her usual warmth, apologizing and promising to make it up to me. But that evening, her messages were short, almost cold, and when I insisted on seeing her, she reluctantly agreed. It had sort of been like that the entire week. When she arrived, she looked more than just tired. She seemed distant, like her mind was a million miles away, and she wasn't telling me something. Her usual smile was missing, replaced by a forced, almost robotic expression. We sat down for dinner that I had made for us, but the conversation was strained. Sonia barely spoke. I tried to lighten the mood, bringing up our favorite inside jokes and shared memories, but nothing seemed to reach her. As the night wore on, my anxiety grew. I kept asking myself if I had done something wrong or if something had happened at work until I couldn't take it anymore, and I gently confronted her, asking if everything was okay. She sighed deeply, avoiding my gaze. She told me she was just really tired and stressed from work, but her words felt hollow and lacked sincerity. For the first time in our relationship, I felt the pang of insecurity, wondering if there was something she wasn't telling me. My mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. Was she unhappy with me? Was there someone else? The uncertainty gnawed at me, and I struggled to push those thoughts aside, trying to convince myself that I was overreacting. That night, as we lay in bed, the distance between us felt like an insurmountable chasm. She fell asleep quickly, but I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling. I can't really explain the feeling. It felt more intuitive than anything. I'm sure some of you have experienced this before. I know it was probably wrong to go through her phone, but I honestly had to know. Even if nothing was really wrong, I just had to squash it. I'm ashamed to admit that I went through her phone. I stumbled upon a thread of messages with a name I didn't recognize. My heart sank as I read through them. I don't know what I initially thought I would find, but a part of me really hoped that I wouldn't come across anything like that. There were flirty texts, sexting, late-night conversations, and multiple plans to meet up. My worst fears were being confirmed right before my eyes. As I dug deeper, I found more messages with other men, revealing that she had been cheating on me for what seemed like our entire relationship. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. The woman I loved, the one I thought I knew so well, had been living a double life. Every memory we had together now felt tainted, every moment of happiness a cruel joke. I felt a surge of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak all at once. I couldn't breathe, my chest tightening as I tried to process the enormity of what I had discovered. I called my brother in tears. In the morning, I confronted her, and I was instantly met with crocodile tears, "I'm sorry," and manipulation by threatening self-harm. She played the victim card, and me, being young and dumb, fell for it. Eventually, I caved. She brought up this idea of having an open relationship. I wasn't ready to let her go just yet. I blamed myself and apologized for not being good enough for her to want to stay with one man. At the time, she let me take the fall. I told her I'd be a better man. I tried the open relationship thing, but I didn't meet with any other women. It was mostly just her speaking to guys and claiming that she wasn't speaking to the same guy that she had been cheating on me with. There were times that she wanted to bring a third person into the bedroom with us, and in fear of her leaving me, I agreed. But the kicker is she didn't want it to be a female, she only wanted male third parties. Like a fool, I agreed. It was about 6 months of that when I asked her to move in with me because I couldn't trust her. We spoke about getting married and starting a poly relationship. I had entertained it for a little bit, but I thought that by living together, I might be able to control something in our relationship. But I quickly realized that that was a naive hope. She started asking if other people could move in with us, pushing the boundaries even further. I resisted. I didn't want our home to become a revolving door of strangers. Despite my attempts to set limits, I felt increasingly powerless in my own relationship. She started having sex with other partners, and turned me down more and more. We had very little sex. Another year passed in this twisted arrangement, and finally something shifted in me. I got angry and started resenting her. I became really bitter and cold. I couldn't believe that this woman I loved had hurt me so badly. The pain and betrayal festered in me until it transformed into a dark desire for revenge. I decided to give her a taste of her own medicine. I went out and met women, bringing them home and asking Sonia if we could have threesomes. She got mad at me for even asking, which was the height of hypocrisy considering what she had put me through. I made sure she saw the flirtatious texts and provocative pictures on my phone. I'd come home late, smelling of perfume, and wouldn't offer any explanations. I wouldn't tell her who I was with, even though it had been one of our rules. I wanted her to feel the same paranoia and heartbreak I had endured for so long. Seeing her anger felt like a twisted vindication, but it didn't bring the satisfaction I hoped for. Instead, it just deepened my sense of loss and delusion. The woman I had once loved and admired had become a source of pain and resentment. The relationship that had once brought me so much joy was now a toxic cycle of betrayal and retaliation. The whole thing was really ruining every aspect of my life. I hardly saw my family anymore because I was ashamed. When I did see them, they complained that they didn't even know who I was anymore. My brother mentioned how unhappy and sad I looked. Finally, one day in 2023, I woke up and wondered to myself, what the hell am I doing? Who even am I? I didn't recognize the person I'd become. Sonia and I were now basically just roommates. We weren't sleeping in the same bed anymore. Our paths hardly crossed. One of these women that I had started seeing in attempts to make Sonia jealous was actually falling in love with me, but I was just trying to keep it purely physical. I didn't want to hurt people like Sonia was hurting me, so I broke it off. At this point, I told Sonia that I couldn't do this anymore, and I was just wasting my life away with this soul sucker who cheats on me right in front of my eyes. I asked her to move out, which wasn't easy. At first, she straight up refused to accept it. She said she wasn't moving out, and I said if she wasn't leaving, then I was going to pack up stuff for her and leave it on the front lawn. She told me that I was throwing everything away. She said that I couldn't just kick her out because it was our place, and I said that it was actually my place, and she's being the worst roommate I've ever had. Then the floodgates opened, and I told her that she was an evil person who just wanted to hurt me, and I've been a dead man walking since I first discovered she cheated on me. She told me I was being dramatic, and she said that this whole life takes two people. She said that I knew what I was getting into the moment I agreed to open the relationship. She said that I could have said no at any moment, and then she called me a weak little boy and told me that I was a quitter. I said that she was the one who gave up the moment she decided to cheat on me and continued to cheat on me. I said that I tried to make it work, and the argument escalated from there. She accused me of being selfish and unreasonable, of abandoning our relationship without trying hard enough to fix it. I countered by listing all the ways she had hurt me, the countless nights I had spent agonizing over her betrayals, the times I had swallowed my pride and pain to keep us together. From there, I just started packing up her stuff and carrying it out onto the lawn, even the tiniest of things that I knew she had bought, like planter pots and bottles of wine. Anything that was hers, I just wanted it out of there. She started yelling at me and pushing me. At one point, she tried to get physical with me, and I had to lock her out of the house. She called one of her partners, and then it only escalated from there. The police got involved. Basically, her partner and I got physical. I was defending myself, and I bled all over my front porch. I ended up charging him, and he spent a few nights in jail. Sonia tried to come back the next day, sobbing and trying to apologize. She asked me where she was supposed to go, and I told her that she could go to any of the other partners that she had, or friends or family. I should have told her that I was done. She was hysterical. I told her that I couldn't keep living like this. She continued to resist, making every excuse to delay the inevitable. She played on my emotions, reminding me of the good times, the plans we had made for the future. I told her she had to pack her stuff, and I didn't want to see her again. I said I'd help her pack up her stuff and load it into a vehicle, and that it had to be out by the end of the day. The reality of the situation began to sink in for her. After hours of back and forth, tears and vomit, yes, she puked from hyperventilating, she finally caved, though it was clear she was far from accepting it. As I was moving her stuff outside, she said, "I hope you know what you're doing," and I told her that it was something I should have done a long time ago. My brother and his wife ended up coming over to help and just for moral support, and I appreciate the hell out of them for that. As she drove away for the last time, I felt a tumult of emotions. There was relief in reclaiming my space and my life, but also a profound sadness for the love that had been lost and the future that would never be. After that, I blocked her on my phone and over social media. It may be dramatic, but I burned whatever she had left. Practically anything that would remind me of her was gone. This first real relationship turned out to be a painful experience, one that shattered my naive expectations of love. The betrayal and heartache taught me more about myself and the complexity of relationships than I could have ever imagined. It was a bad first relationship, no doubt about it. I learned the hard way about the importance of trust, communication, and self-respect. Despite the pain, it also taught me to recognize my own worth and the necessity of setting boundaries. It showed me that true love shouldn't come at the cost of my own happiness and well-being. In the end, this experience shaped me. It made me more aware of what I need and deserve in a relationship. It was a harsh lesson, but one that ultimately made me stronger and more prepared for future relationships. If it's any consolation, I heard from one of our friends that Sonia had been let go from her role at the hospital because she had been severely underperforming. Some of her colleagues had been complaining about her. I guess I wasn't the only one who had issues with trusting her. Apparently, she had been stealing medication for some of her partners and not filling out patient charts properly. Last I heard, hospital administrators are reportedly conducting an internal investigation to assess the impact of Sonia's conduct on patient care and workplace dynamics. Anyway, thanks for reading this. If I can offer any advice after all of this, it's this. If something feels off in your relationship, don't ignore it. Trust your gut instincts and address any concerns you have with your partner. Don't settle for less than you deserve. You deserve to be with someone who respects and values you, who is faithful and committed to building a healthy, loving relationship. Sometimes, despite your best efforts, a relationship may not be healthy or fulfilling. Don't be afraid to walk away if it's no longer serving you or bringing you happiness. Remember, it's okay to prioritize your own happiness and well-being. Let's unpack this carnival of chaos, shall we? From grocery store meet-cutes to front porch showdowns, you've really covered the spectrum. Who knew holding the door open could lead to such a wild ride? And let's give it up for Sonia, the master of manipulation and the queen of crocodile tears. I mean, threatening self-harm to avoid accountability? That's next-level emotional gymnastics right there. And open relationships? More like open Pandora's box of disaster. But hey, at least you had a shining moment of clarity amidst the chaos. Sometimes you've got to hit rock bottom to realize there's only one way to go from there, up. And kicking Sonia to the curb? That's just the first step on the road to redemption, OP. So, here's to you, the survivor of the relationship apocalypse. You faced the fire-breathing dragon of deceit and came out the other side stronger, wiser, and with a few battle scars to brag about. And if anyone tries to tell you it was all for nothing, just remind them you've got a PhD in relationship dysfunction and you're not afraid to use it. Do you have a similar story? Share it with us in the comments below. And thank you for joining us today.
Oh no, I need to call the police. What were they thinking? I got attacked by a woman around 35 years old wearing a hat and dark glasses. Can you guess her age? That's the best description I could manage. I'm having a hard time understanding this. Let me start from the beginning. Maybe it will make more sense. I'm hoping that by writing everything down, I can figure something out. The shock of being attacked without reason in public is so different from anything I've experienced before. I just can't wrap my head around it. Just a few hours ago, life was great. I had a wonderful life, a beautiful home, money in the bank, and a husband who adored me. But that's not why I was so happy leaving the office on Monday. It was for a more private reason. My husband was away on business, and I had plans with my lover John when I got home. John is a recent addition to my life, and he's taken me to new places in bed. That's why I was walking to my car with a smile on my face. As I approached, I felt a hand on my shoulder. Hoping it was John, I turned around, only to be met with a fist to my face from an angry woman. I barely had time to see her face before falling to the ground, letting her kick me in the back without a word. Eventually, she left, and fearing she might return, I called for help. The ambulance took me to the hospital. I arrived before the night rush, so I passed out a bit and was quickly attended to. Besides a split lip and some bruises, I was okay. They warned me about delayed concussion symptoms and told me to ice the bruises before sending me home. The police questioned me, but with a vague description of a slender blonde woman in a hat and dark glasses, catching her seemed unlikely. I couldn't even tell if she was a natural blonde or give a reason for the attack. I asked the police for a ride back to my car, but they said it was against the rules. I tried to put on a smile, but my lip hurt too much. Attempting to call John for a ride failed, so I had to call a taxi. My new plan for the evening was painkillers, maybe vodka, ice for the bruises, and a long bath until it was time to call my husband. He always knew how to help me make sense of things and make me laugh when I was sad. I wouldn't be surprised if he dropped everything and drove 4 hours home after hearing what happened. I guess I was always his priority. I had only been home for about half an hour. The bathtub was full and the ice was cooling my martini when there was a knock on the door. Thinking it was the Chinese takeout I ordered, I opened the door. The next thing I knew, I had vague memories, and as I tried to sit up, my head hurt terribly. Something had dried on my face. Scratching a bit, I found blood under my fingernail. Panic set in as I felt my entire face gently. Thankfully, my nose wasn't broken, but my cheek was, and I had a black eye. Turning my head slowly, I saw dried blood spatters on the floor. Continuing my inspection, I found a lump on the back of my head and a bruise, likely from hitting the floor. Despite the pain, I straightened up. Hallucinations and flashes of images played in my mind. I distinctly saw a stocky woman with long black hair and almost bushy eyebrows, her face hidden by a scarf. That's all I saw, except for a wooden handle or bat flying toward my eyes. I woke up embarrassed, still on the couch. The clock showed 5 a.m., and I had a terrible headache. Every movement felt like a bowling ball hitting the walls inside my skull. As I staggered into the kitchen, I felt pain in my groin. The attacker must have kicked me there. I swallowed 2 painkillers and staggered to the bathroom. The mirror revealed an unpleasant sight. Whatever they slapped me with, my nose was okay, but my cheek was broken, and I had a black eye. Who are these people? This woman and the one from this afternoon. What's going on? I didn't think I had any enemies, even though I'm a real estate agent. I wondered if I should call more than one ambulance, but decided against it. Yesterday afternoon, the doctor advised me to watch for delayed concussion for 8 hours. It's been longer since I got drubbed the second time. I also thought about calling the police, but chose not to. Our front door wasn't visible from the hotel grounds, and I had less information to provide than last time. One woman accidentally attacking me is one thing, but 2 is just weird. Despite the late hour, I decided to call Dave. He would know what to do. Oh no, Dave. What did he think when he tried to call me last night? Like he always did and I didn't answer? He would try calling my cell phone and home phone and then ask where I was. I hope this didn't make him think I was sneaking out of the house when he wasn't here. I've always been incredibly careful in my dealings. Wouldn't it be ironic if a false tip gave me away? Taking my mobile phone, I checked how many missed calls there were from my husband. Strange, but there were none. I picked up my home phone and dialed the number to get a list of my latest actions. The last unanswered call was made 3 days ago. What the? I couldn't remember the last time Dave didn't talk to me when he was gone. In fact, it was part of my safety net that I would routinely call him on his hotel phone, citing the supposed dangers of using a cell phone too much before going to meet my lover at a motel or on very rare occasions, inviting him out here. This reminded me that I had called John on my cell phone the previous afternoon and had not yet deleted the recording. I wasn't stupid enough to store his number in my phone, and without a trace, there was no evidence. There were several photos on it that should never have seen the light of day, but my phone was the only place they were kept, and they were hidden there. I also made sure it wasn't locked with a regular password or one of those boilerplate items. Just my fingerprint and a huge, strong password. Dave thinks it's a work requirement not to share my password. On the rare occasions when he needed to use my phone, I opened it for him and never let him out of my sight. I decided it was safer to store the photos on my phone that I can protect than any other media that could be discovered. I deleted the call to John, left a message in his message bank, and noted that he also did not answer my previous call. I'm surprised Dave didn't call. Despite the early hour, I called him. I really needed to hear his comforting voice. The call went straight to the message bank, which was weird. Maybe he lost his charger and his battery died or something. This wasn't the first time. By this time, it was already after 5 in the morning, and I had a show. There was no way I could show up looking like I did now, so I put on more makeup than usual to cover it up. After all, I had a whole arsenal. I should probably explain this. You see, all through high school, I was very ordinary. You've all met those who watched from the sidelines as all the boys worth their salt ignored them to go after the athletic, popular, bright girls. Although I was proud that I was not like some other plain ones, they exposed themselves to everyone, mistakenly believing that being popular meant they had succeeded. Thus, I haven't any relationship when I left school at 16. My parents were not overly ambitious towards me, and were happy to support me as I attended a series of evening courses to gain some administrative qualification while I worked as a waitress. In my spare time, I lost my purity to someone who, I realized too late, was a smart carnivore. I realized this when, the next morning, after a quick, not convenient closeness in his hotel room, he asked me to leave. I chalked it up to experience and thought that this episode had made me an expert at choosing carnivores. That did not happen. My next 2 closeness encounters ended just as disastrously. The one after them was a guy with less experience than me. Here, I already left him after the first night. This is how I sailed through life until I was 20. That's when Dave came into my life. Dave was a year ahead of me in school and seemed to be my male equivalent. He was tall and thin, but nothing else about him was striking. We got to talking at the restaurant where I worked, where he invited several clients to lunch. After the first meeting, I learned enough to understand that he was a man with a clear career plan and determination to get things done. I accepted the date, and the rest, as they say, is history. I hooked up with him about 2 weeks after meeting, and it was clear we were both new to this, making it awkward. We were both open to learning and used each other for that. If I had to describe my life a year before he turned 21, I'd say it was good. I had a boyfriend who was growing and clearly loved me. We weren't invited to fancy events, but we didn't mind. We moved into an apartment, and I was taking a real estate course paid for by Dave when my crucial birthday came. Dave celebrated his first big bonus by treating me. I got my own car, a voucher for 2 days with a beauty consultant, and a bigger engagement ring than I expected. I said yes, drove the car, and delayed using the voucher. Oh, I wish I could tear up that voucher. Then I could have a husband with his phone on and a face without bruises. Dave reminded me about the voucher, but I was busy planning a simple wedding. We didn't have many friends. In the end, I decided to use it for a little treat for myself before the big day. That's when I found out it was for 2 days with Caroline, an elegant woman in her 30s. I don't know what qualities she had, but she knew how to showcase femininity. Our first stop was a hairdresser, where I had a major makeover. I have to admit I was nervous about how it would turn out. The rest of that first day was spent shopping. Caroline took me to upscale stores, and later that evening, she used my phone to ask Dave to update my credit card. At the end of the day, looking in the mirror at my new hairstyle and clothes, I almost called Caroline to tell her not to worry. The next day, the hairstyle and clothes truly made me beautiful. The following day, at the salon, I got pampered with a pedicure, manicure, facial, and scalp massage. Then I met Colin, who claimed to be more fun than a tree full of monkeys and, if you believe him, used to be a beautician for some famous stars. He and Caroline transformed my face over the next 2 hours, including some corrections. I wasn't allowed to look until they said I was perfect. When I saw my reflection, I involuntarily took a step back. That's when Caroline's true genius emerged. The clothes and hairstyle that seemed out of place before now framed a face that I had to admit was beautiful. I couldn't believe it. The change was stunning. Caroline made me look up from admiring myself for Colin's 2-hour lecture on how he uncovered the natural masterpiece that was me. I thanked him and Caroline for this life-changing experience. If I had known how it would actually affect me, I might have been shocked. Dave did a funny double take when I got home, but quickly recovered, telling me it just showed me as he always saw me. That night was the wildest in bed, and 3 days later, we were married. The honeymoon was confusing for men, and handsome guys who never paid me attention were now vying to dance with me. I supported them when Dave didn't mind. He was the first to admit that dancing wasn't his favorite. Despite all the attention, it still didn't hit me that the game had changed. This realization started when the wedding photo album arrived. I saw that I was absolutely stunning, and for the first time, I felt that I had married a man a bit shorter than me, noticeable in various settings. I probably feel this way deep down, even today, which is neither logical nor fair. What have I achieved in the 5 years since my marriage compared to Dave? He built his business and was on his way to becoming a millionaire. I used my looks to sell real estate. Despite the unequal success, for some reason, I felt superior. 5 years later, after revealing my true self, I became popular, praised, entitled, and within 6 months, an unfaithful wife. In my defense, resisting temptation was extremely difficult. Suddenly my mind, which believed my body was a 5 out of 10, was pursued by men who were 9 out of 10. It took waking up with a third such man for me to realize they were just more attractive versions of the carnivore who took my honor. From that point on, I had complete control in choosing my partners. Now, with my bruised face, I decided to put on a good layer of concealer and foundation. Feeling sorry for myself, I attempted to call Dave every 15 minutes, but had no luck. It took an hour and a half of layering until I managed to hide everything to my satisfaction. Unfortunately, I had no success in communicating with my husband or explaining the strange behavior of the two women. To ease my loneliness, I made coffee and drank it, feeling more alone than I had in years. Making friends with women was always a challenge for me, and with Dave's unresponsiveness, I found myself isolated in my darkest hour. With an hour to spare, I texted John to call me when he could, then occupied myself with meaningless content in my inbox until it was time to leave for the office. Carrying the laptop bag and luxury briefcase Dave bought me last year to my car in the detached garage, I placed them in the back seat. Slamming the door, I turned to the driver's door and unexpectedly, she was standing right in front of me as I turned away from the back door of my car. I can only assume she must have been hiding behind the garage wall or somewhere else when I re-entered. The incident happened so quickly that it was hard to recall when it ended. I remember falling to the ground, feeling someone's foot step on my hands, which I instinctively raised to protect my face. The blows eventually stopped, and I ran towards the house. The brutality of the attack was utterly shocking, and my face was burning. Leaning against the door briefly, I stumbled towards the downstairs bathroom. The mirror revealed 3 long scratches on my left cheek and 2 on my right, apparently caused by raking fingernails. My right arm and forearm hurt, but fortunately nothing was broken. I called the police again, then Dave and John while I waited for the cops to arrive. No one answered. I felt so alone. The office called just after 9, questioning why I had abandoned the client. They only calmed down a bit when I explained the attack while working for a real estate company. The police were of little help, and it seemed like media stink thought I was wasting their time with vague descriptions. They interviewed neighbors and asked if I needed an ambulance. I didn't. I needed my husband to answer my call. In complete confusion, I closed the door behind the cops, walked into the living room, and yelled at the photo on the mantel where Dave and I were standing. "Next time, you'll take your phone charger, Dave, even if I have to pack it for you myself." An attack by one random woman wasn't unusual, and 2 was statistically unlikely, but 3 was almost impossible. So it was time for me to carefully consider the possible reasons why I had so many enemies. Unfortunately, I couldn't think of anything. This time, makeup couldn't conceal the scratches. To worsen matters, I had to remove earlier applied creams with makeup remover pads to apply a little disinfectant to my new scratches. It's unknown what kind of microbes this psychopath had under her nails. The scratches burned intensely, and the disinfectant felt like I had poured gasoline on my skin. The task was made even more difficult by the fact that my right arm was starting to feel raw and bruised. By the end, my face was red and blotchy, and the last attacker must have been wearing heels or something, as bruises appeared on my arms and forearms in distinct forms. I called Dave again, eager to hear his voice, but the call went to voicemail once more. Frustrated, I considered sending him an email, hoping he'd hurry home when he reads it. The issue was my laptop in the car. Walking down the stairs awkwardly like a 90-year-old, I couldn't ignore the noticeable bruises on my lower back, legs, and groin. Trying to turn the bolt on the front door, fear held me back. I scolded myself for cowardice. Remembering real estate seminars, I gave myself a pep talk. The motivation behind the beatings was a mystery, but after the 3 women took out their anger on me, it seemed like a case of mistaken identity. That's what I thought. Now thinking logically, I considered viewing the garage from the back door to surprise and ambush someone. Walking from room to room, checking windows, the route to the garage, I realized there were blind spots. The secluded backyard left me vulnerable without witnesses. My phone rang. Dave. Finally, I rushed towards it, ignoring the protest of my bruised and battered limbs. I was disappointed. It wasn't Dave. It was my office arranging a meeting with a client at a hotel in 30 minutes. Excuses about being injured fell on deaf ears. They were working lean, and if I couldn't handle it, they made it clear they could find a replacement. The challenge remained, getting to my car safely. A light bulb went on. I'd call a taxi. I did just that, giving very specific instructions about parking in the middle of the driveway where I could see everything from the house. After all, there could be someone hiding behind the garage or behind the hedge on the property line. But of course, with the taxi driver as a witness, I would be safe. While waiting for the taxi, I did everything I could for my face. 10 minutes later, the taxi horn prompted me to make one last visual check outside, and then an awkward dash to the safety of the taxi. I didn't really relax until we were a block away from home. The driver was a woman, which worried me, but after she asked where I was going, she lost interest in me. 15 minutes later, nearing our destination, I realized that I had eaten my fill. The house keys were in my briefcase in the backseat of my car, parked in the garage. Ordering the taxi back would make me at least 25 minutes late for the meeting, and the client might well be very indignant at being set up a second time and demand my head from the agency. I decided to somehow get through the scheduled meeting. I could show the client the exterior and report some bureaucratic mistakes with the keys. I'll almost certainly miss the sale, but hopefully I won't get fired. I called Dave again before reaching home, waiting half an hour for the client, who arrived by taxi. She was a tall, dark-haired woman around 30, quite pretty except for the eyes hidden behind dark glasses. Carrying a trendy, huge bag, she looked at a paper, then walked towards me, swallowing my excuse for the key fiasco, but looked irritated when I explained that the best thing I could suggest was to walk outside looking in the windows. Luckily, I knew everything about the property by heart, so I didn't have to refer to any notes also left in the briefcase. I knew in my heart that if this house didn't sell quickly, the owners might lower the price enough for Dave and me to buy it. It was a beautiful green area, populated by young urban professionals. Dave and I would fit in perfectly here. We walked out into the backyard, where I pointed out a spacious art studio located separate from the main house. After I finished listing its features, I walked over to the master bedroom window and peered through the gap in the curtains to see how good the view was. I heard an inappropriate sound behind me. Looking back, I would describe it as a clicking sound. I turned and noticed the client holding a telescopic baton, one of those self-defense tools often advertised in women's magazines. Her cute expression turned into one of distorted hatred. I believe she hissed bad word before swinging the baton forcefully at my head. The blow hit my hastily raised forearms, causing excruciating pain, and I actually heard a bone crack. I think the woman, in her furious state, heard it too. Her anger seemed to fade as she stood there watching me scream, lowering my hand as the pain overwhelmed me. However, some residual anger remained, and she struck the side of my head. I absorbed most of the blow with my undamaged hand, but it still knocked me to the ground. When I came to, the wild woman was gone, leaving me completely alone. Even though she disappeared, something fell from her purse when she pulled out the baton, a piece of paper that I saw her stuff into her bag. When I examined it, I found a photograph, about a 5 size, lying face up on the ground. It was a familiar image, one of my favorites. I was perplexed about how this crazy woman got a copy. It was a selfie I took about 3 months ago, capturing in closeness moment with John. My phone was in my outstretched hand when I took the photo. Despite everything, I had the strength at that moment to press the button, and the excellent framing was purely luck. Recalling the crummy motel room we paid cash for, John and I, eager after weeks without closeness, engaged in dirty and rough closeness. Despite the roughness, I experienced incredible previously unknown pleasure. This photograph became the means by which the woman identified me, leading me to guess she might be Mrs. John, judging by her anger. I never inquired about John's wife, just as we never discussed Dave. I didn't consider it important enough to think about. Before holding my damaged hand, I rolled into a sitting position. I didn't debate internally about calling an ambulance. This time I did so. However, no police involvement to avoid exposing my affairs, which could lead to Dave finding out and result in something terrible. The question of how John's baton-wielding wife got her hands on this photo occupied my mind as I staggered to meet the ambulance. I had never shared this photo with anyone or any other device, not even with John. Was my phone hacked? At the hospital, it was the same triage nurse, ready to call the police. I talked her out of it, convincing her it was an accident. Despite her disbelief, she respected my wishes after I vigorously shook my head when she inquired about my husband. They set my arm, administered strong painkillers, and then ushered me into a taxi. The considerate taxi driver took me straight to my front door, waiting until I entered, locked the door from inside. Against the doctor's recommendations, I washed down the painkillers with a large, very large shot of vodka while simultaneously concocting a story to tell my husband. I left him numerous confused and worried messages that he'll discover when he charges his phone. My attempt to call him again failed, so I remembered my idea to send him an email. Since my laptop was in the car and it was already dark, I wasn't going to take any more chances with another potential attack. Then I recalled our old desktop computer, which we used before getting laptops, and Dave continued to use. I turned it on and went to pour myself some vodka. When I returned, there was a small spinning hourglass on the screen, and under it, the word sink. What's sinking? I responded to the call of nature, which took a while. Ever tried unzipping your pants side zipper with one arm in a sling? When I returned to the office, the computer had finished syncing. What it was syncing with and displaying on the screen was terrible. Well, that clarifies everything. Everything. Who were these awful women and why did they do what they did? Oddly, this knowledge provided some comfort. After the complete confusion of the past 24 hours, what the screensaver showed on our old home computer explained much more. It became clear why, for the first time in forever, my husband didn't call me during his business trip, why he didn't answer the calls, why he might never call me again, how I was considered an arrogant person and probably lost the rest of my life. I barely made it to the bathroom when I painfully vomited. Touching the tender left side of my face, I felt the purple bruise and scratches on the right before leaving the bathroom to turn off the monitor displaying disgusting, destructive photos on the screensaver of a computer I hardly ever used. It displayed the contents of my phone more precisely, the photographs on it. They flashed on the computer screen, changing approximately every 10 seconds. Strangely enough, photographs of houses or specific interior elements were interspersed with much more graphic photographs. I recalled how a couple of weeks ago, my boss hired a tech company to update our phones. I watched like a hawk while the technician played with mine. Now it was obvious that at least one of these changes resulted in the photos I had so carefully hidden on it being transferred to my desktop along with the rest of my photo folder. And if they could see the desktop of the old computer, could they? Oh no. Dave's laptop was much more modern than the old home computer. A feeling of dread came over me as I imagined Dave looking at the 100 or so trophy photographs. Photographs meant only for my personal pleasure. Photos of me and different men in different poses. Can I imagine David capturing photographs of my lovers' faces and printing them, taking them to my work, and comparing the faces to the names in their files with the help of our secretary, who always had a soft spot for him? Unfortunately, yes, I can. Names led to addresses and wives. Wives who saw these photographs. Wives who, in my case, provided the blows, scrapes, and bruises. After yet another unanswered call to my husband's phone, I struggled upstairs and checked his wardrobe. But what I saw only made my depression worse. Then, ignoring the terrible photos on the old computer screensaver, I turned on the monitor again and logged into our bank's online website and saw a few tiny numbers where there should have been big ones. I dropped my chin to my chest. The realization of what a spoiled, conniving, entitled person I had become shocked me. The blow was as painful as all my physical injuries combined. Working with both commercial and domestic properties, there was never a shortage of male clients to choose from, and I made a choice. Perhaps in the early days, I tried to be very careful with my lovers. Back then, I had a strict rule: no photos, videos, or any traces. Oh, I did make a few mistakes along the way. I was almost exposed by one guy who wanted to continue the relationship after it had run its course. In my opinion, it was then that I decided to limit myself to married men who had as much to lose as I did. But I calmed down and relaxed some of my rules when it became obvious that Dave trusted me. Implicit error. Big mistake. Huge. I should have stuck to the no photos rule. I kicked myself for my absolute arrogance, wondering how I could let this happen. I became the popular girl I dreamed of being in school, and somehow had to back up that popularity by sleeping with all the hot men. My mistake was thinking that my marriage could withstand the truth about its real nature. I'm not naive enough to believe that Dave would never discover my affairs, but I had a plan ready for that scenario. One I was confident Dave would accept. I figured he wouldn't easily find a replacement on my level, and ultimately, he'd forgive me. My plan hinged on him learning about just one lover. I'd admit my weakness, claim he was a skilled seducer, shed some tears, promise it wouldn't happen again, and then ask him to let me share everything I've kept hidden. As I reflected, I wondered if this was merely a self-preservation tactic, a way to postpone the inevitable realization that Dave had no intention of forgiving me. He didn't catch me in bed with someone else, triggering my rehearsed response. How could I have predicted he'd discover me in cyberspace with dozens of lovers at the same time?
I've always seen myself as a committed husband and father, someone willing to do whatever it takes to keep my family secure and content. Like many, I envisioned a life with my spouse built on shared dreams and mutual support. Yet life often challenges our assumptions, and at times, even our best intentions face unforeseen obstacles. When I first met Sarah, I thought we made a great pair. She was ambitious and driven, traits I respected as we planned our future. I put in the effort to build a business while balancing family responsibilities. But gradually, the things that initially brought us together began to pull us apart, leading to fractures that ultimately shattered our relationship. This is the story of how those cracks deepened and led to the breakdown of my family life. My name is Paul Andrews, and this is how my marriage unraveled due to my wife Sarah's neglect of personal hygiene and her growing emotional distance. Sarah Ridgway Andrews and I were introduced by friends who believed we'd be a good fit. She'd recently graduated and was working in management at First United National Bank, while I had just started with Allied Accounting. A colleague set us up on a double date, assuming our professional backgrounds and values would make us compatible. There's nothing quite like the thrill of a first blind date between an accountant and a business intern. It was clear we shared at least one thing. Neither of us planned on sleeping together that night. I'd have enjoyed it if this average-looking blonde leaned in close, but she kept her distance, appearing uneasy with physical contact. If she had curves, they were concealed under her heavy sweater, long skirt, and jacket. We had an engaging conversation about our career goals, discovering surprisingly similar aspirations. We both came from middle-income backgrounds in smaller towns and were now in the big city. My goal was to become an entrepreneur, using my accounting skills to distinguish between a good deal and a great one. Her ambition was to advance in the corporate world, allowing time off for 2 or 3 maternity leaves to start a family. This gave me some hope that one day she'd want a family and perhaps be open to a relationship. At the end of the night, I walked her to her apartment. She gave me a quick hug, thanked me for the evening, and left. I thought, well, it beats drinking alone in my apartment. On Monday, Steve dropped by my office and gave me a high five. I quipped, "You must have had a relaxing Saturday night with Brenda." He grinned. "Yes, Saturday was great. But I'm congratulating you. Sarah couldn't stop talking about you to Brenda. You must have made quite an impression." "Really?" I replied, surprised. "It was a nice evening, but I didn't think it was all that remarkable." Steve laughed. "Well, she told Brenda to tell me to tell you to call her, like a note-passing routine from junior high." "Well, I guess I should call her then," I said, still a bit baffled. Sarah apparently knew we could make a good couple long before I did. A few months of dating later, I finally saw beneath her reserved exterior. This woman was stunning, with curves hidden under her modest attire. I was awestruck when she walked out of bed one morning. She explained, "I blossomed in high school, but unwanted attention made me start dressing conservatively." Our relationship grew through a mix of strong chemistry and shared admiration, trust, and care. Marriage felt inevitable, as did our 2 daughters, Hannah and Miranda. Our physical connection was intense before we had children, and even better afterward. Sarah climbed the corporate ladder, taking on new responsibilities. I thrived at Allied Accounting, eventually earning a leave of absence to get my CPA. Mr. Karstadt, the firm's owner, became a mentor, teaching me more than any class or textbook could. One day, he invited me to lunch and confided, "I'm in talks to sell the firm to a large group. Paul, you're my best employee, but you won't do well under new management. I think you should leave Allied and start your own practice. They'd stifle your entrepreneurial drive and you'd end up miserable. Bring some clients with you so you're not starting from scratch." I was stunned but grateful. "Thank you," I replied, deeply moved by his encouragement. That weekend, Sarah and I talked it over nonstop. "Don't risk it by staying as an employee," she advised. "Forget about business risks and focus on climbing the corporate ladder. There's plenty of income to be made working in a big firm." "Yes," I answered, "if that's what I wanted for the next 35 years. Sarah, I'm afraid I'll end up resenting the routine work. This is my chance to pursue what I've dreamed of. I'll start from home and build a client base, then move to an office." Sarah frowned. "Paul, this isn't a smart move. We have 2 small kids and can't afford more risks." Her practical side took charge. "I can't wait until I'm old to take a risk," I countered. "It's now or maybe never." She sighed. "Fine, but I won't support this financially. I'll set up a new account for my income, covering half the household expenses. You'll need to handle the rest." "Understood, Sarah," I replied, though I thought, "And thanks for the support." But she wasn't done. "I won't co-sign any loans for your business. If it fails, I want no part of it." Since her tone was so detached, I had no plans to involve her bank. But I knew she'd take an interest once I succeeded. Over the following year, life wasn't easy. Sarah had a steady income while my earnings varied. By the second year, I was making slightly more than Sarah, but she wished I could bring in a more predictable monthly income. My business model was shifting. Rather than simply tracking finances, I was advising clients on potential deals, which is what I really wanted to do, and I was good at it. With higher earnings than Sarah, I began reinvesting more into my startup. I set my income to match hers and put anything extra back into my business. When promising opportunities arose, I'd reduce or even waive my consulting fees in exchange for a share of the profits, taking a 5% to 15% stake for my advice and lowering ongoing accounting fees. This reduced startup costs for clients and gave them access to my insights. Although it restricted me from auditing due to my investor status, this setup benefited both sides, with clients able to buy me out at any time based on market value. However, Sarah was displeased with these investments, so I stopped mentioning them. My accounting firm's revenue wasn't ideal, but my equity in these companies was building wealth not reflected on my balance sheet, as shares were valued at cost. With a skilled team in place, I dedicated more time to my kids, never missing a performance, game, or parent-teacher conference. Those were rewarding years. My children were content, and Sarah and I were doing well financially. Sarah's career progressed, and she was promoted to assistant vice president at the bank, reporting to multiple superiors. With her new title, she wanted a bigger home. "We need a larger, nicer place to match my position at the bank," she announced one evening. I suggested, maybe we should wait. She didn't bring it up again until Saturday, when she went to an open house alone and signed a contract. I was frustrated, but there wasn't much I could do. Through my Chamber of Commerce connections, I later learned she referred to me as the little accountant, and her sarcastic remarks about other accounting firms started to slip into our conversations. One Saturday, I decided it was time to address our relationship. "Can we sit down and talk for a few minutes?" I asked as I approached her in the living room. She gave me a dismissive look. "It can wait," she replied. "I have laundry to do." "I think we need to talk," I said firmly. "Let's discuss it tonight," she said, walking away. "Can you spare 15 minutes? I asked after her. She called back, "Sure, later." That evening, she claimed to be too tired. Sunday morning, with the kids preparing for Sunday school, she left with them before we could talk. Later, as she was heading out again, I stopped her at the door. "Do you have a few minutes to talk?" I asked. She snapped, "Why are you nagging me all weekend? You're like a child needing his mother's attention. Can't you see I'm going to help my mom with her checkbook? I'll be back in an hour." "It's been a day since I asked for 15 minutes of your time," I replied. "I can wait another hour." 4 hours later, she finally returned, quickly starting dinner. After eating, I turned to her. "Now might be a good time to talk," I said, keeping my tone calm. She gave me an exasperated look as I continued. "I feel like we're growing apart, and I'm worried about our marriage." She dropped her fork as the girls looked up. "We don't communicate like we used to, and I feel like you don't respect me as your husband. I think we need to address this before it becomes a bigger issue." Her jaw tightened as she replied, "This is neither the time nor place for this conversation. I'm shocked you'd bring it up in front of the girls." "You should be ashamed, Sarah," I said, my frustration spilling over. "By brushing me off, you're shutting me out again. Is there something you're not telling me?" She stormed off, clearing her plate. I was left at the table with our daughters, who looked shaken. Miranda asked, "Are you and Mom getting divorced?" With tears in my eyes, I said, "No, sweetheart, no one's getting divorced. Moms and dads argue sometimes, just like you and your sister. But that doesn't mean we don't love each other or love you and Hannah. Mom just went out for a drive." They seemed reassured, but I couldn't shake the unease. After cleaning up, I worked in my office until late, hoping she'd return soon. Just before midnight, she slipped into bed beside me. I lifted the blanket, and she nestled close. "I'm not saying I was wrong," she whispered, "but I'll try to show you the respect I want from you." I held her tightly. "That's all I want, too. I want to be the best husband for you." This small reconciliation eased the tension, at least temporarily. A few years later, she was promoted to Vice President of Regulatory Compliance, which meant overseeing the bank's adherence to FDIC, Federal Reserve, and Comptroller of the currency rules. Her view of compliance fit the role perfectly. Nothing could proceed without explicit approval from the authorities. This is exactly the opposite of my approach, I thought. As long as it's not explicitly prohibited, I see it as allowed. It's clear this difference caused friction at home. And fortunately, she didn't know about my investments. They were legal, but someone like her wouldn't approve. Around this time, Sarah began attending bachelorette parties on Tuesday nights. The more she went, the later she'd return. Our kids, now 16 and 14, didn't need a sitter, but they still required parental guidance and attention. I was always there for them. One Tuesday evening, I heard frustrated swearing coming from the master bathroom. Curious, I went upstairs to check on her. She was at the sink, muttering, "Damn, damn, damn." "What's wrong?" I asked. "My damn wedding ring fell down the sink," she grumbled. "Think you can get it, or should I call a plumber?" I asked, a bit annoyed by her tone. Peering under the sink, I replied, "If it's in the trap, I'll get it out. It'll just take a minute." But she snapped, "Don't worry, I won't need it tonight anyway. Interesting, I thought. She's headed out, doesn't need her wedding ring. And that's no accident. Alarmed, I decided to stay alert but silent. I caught a glimpse of her slipping into the bedroom, putting on a sexy lingerie I'd never seen before. She avoided looking at me as she dressed. Just another girls' night out like every Tuesday, she said, irritated. You remember, don't you? Getting nowhere, I went to the garage to grab pliers. She left without saying a word. The trap was on her side of the sink, so I had to move some of her items to reach it. While doing so, I noticed a plain brown box. Curiously, I opened it and found an enema and dowsing kit. What's going on here? I thought. She always complained about digestive issues, but this seemed new. And since when did she need to douche? Digging further, I found the enema nozzle still wet. I felt sick. Rumors about husbands being the last to know seemed true. But what did I actually know? Not much yet. In business, I always did my research before making a move. That's what I'll do now, I decided. I'll start gathering information. But first, I still had to retrieve her ring. Maybe she'd need it after all. I marked the spot where the brown box sat on the floor to see if it would be moved, and took a couple of photos of the contents to check if she put it back as I'd found it. She returned around midnight, slipped into the bathroom, and turned on the shower. I pretended to be asleep, though my heart was pounding. She crawled into bed, and after settling in, she giggled softly. The next morning, I got up early, having barely slept. I closed the bathroom door for privacy before my shower. As I suspected, the brown box had been moved. The nozzle was still damp, and the box had shifted slightly from my mark. Enema before going out, dowsing afterward. Someone was preparing for closeness. Using a Ziploc bag, I carefully collected her underwear and sent it for biological testing. Being an accountant, I knew how assets get divided in a divorce. I'd seen enough cases to know that Sarah would likely keep the house until the kids left for college, while I'd pay child support and lose time with my daughters. I couldn't stand the thought of funding a home where she might entertain someone else while our daughters were left without the supervision they deserved. Now that I had the facts, I began to formulate a plan. The main goal for me was keeping custody of my daughters. I've always been financially secure and a reliable father. Now, I needed to show that she wasn't fit to care for them. The word poison came to mind, not literally but emotionally. Sarah's a perfectionist, holding everyone to high standards. When things go wrong, she loses control, blowing minor problems out of proportion. She can be harsh with her employees, with me, and with the kids. I could use this behavior to turn my daughters against her so they'd choose to stay with me after the divorce. That way, the house and custody of the girls would be mine. Quietly, I turned off her alarm clock. She despises lateness, especially in others. After her long night, I figured she might appreciate a little extra sleep. The kids came down for breakfast and asked where their mom was. I told them, she got in late and will probably sleep in a bit. They understood. Like most teens, they enjoyed a chance to sleep in. After noticing her late-night conversations on her phone, I queued up her video playlist and muted it, hoping that by the time she woke up, her phone battery would be dead. She had an important staff meeting Wednesday morning, which she'd mentioned was crucial. An hour later, I heard her scream my name. Apparently, it was my fault she overslept after her night with some guy. I slipped away to the garage to avoid her tirade and saw one of her Lexus tires was low enough to set off the dashboard alert. She hated anything blocking her screen, so I knew this would drive her nuts on the way to work. Hannah and Miranda weren't spared either. Sarah rushed around trying to dress, do her hair, and apply makeup all at once. Meanwhile, I switched the garage door setting to lock, keeping the roller door down. As she backed out, she didn't realize it hadn't opened, slamming into it and crushing the bottom panels. The three of us walked over, watching as she hit the steering wheel in fury. When she finally pulled forward, I raised the door with a loud creak, and she tore out of the garage, barely missing the mailbox. This might be more entertaining than I thought, I muttered. Let's see what she does when she tries to call the office with a dead phone. Hugging the kids, I told them, Mom's just a little stressed. She'll be better tonight. She still loves you, but maybe not me as much. We all laughed together. I set the alarm clock in our room to max volume, making sure it was on. Unlike Sarah, I made it to work on time, whistling as I walked in. My mood stayed bright until 10 a.m., when my phone buzzed so hard it nearly fell off the desk. Must be my lovely wife, I thought. Good morning, my dear, I answered cheerfully, only to be met with a stream of curses. Her voice was shrill. You need to come here and fix my tire. I nearly died driving this trap. If I'd had the Mercedes I wanted, this wouldn't have happened. Just call AAA, I replied. They'll take care of it. Her response was, "Go to hell." Still in a good mood, I told my assistant I'd be out until after lunch. My first stop was a security store, where I picked up a few small cameras and a voice recorder for her purse. I needed to know more about what was going on. Back home, I set up cameras in the living room and our bedroom, then adjusted the damaged garage panels, though they still looked rough, signaling to all the neighbors what had happened. After that, I reviewed my personal banking and investments. We only had one joint credit card, so I canceled it. I left our shared household account open, reminding myself to transfer half of the balance on payday. I returned home before Sarah and started dinner. As I listened to the garage door's strained creak, she nearly tore it off its hinges coming in. The girls screamed from the kitchen table as she stormed in, visibly furious. She glared at me, saying, "This was the worst day ever. I'm going upstairs for a bath." We had a quiet, whispered dinner afterward, as if we were hiding from a storm. I went upstairs to ask if she wanted to eat, but she threw a bar of soap at me and growled, "If I wanted dinner, I would have told you. Now leave me alone." It was the perfect time to make a small cut in her purse lining and slip the recorder inside. I went downstairs to sleep on the sofa, wanting to avoid the blast of her alarm clock in the morning. Sure enough, the loud rap song that erupted from her alarm, accompanied by her screech and the girl's startled yelps, woke the entire house. The noise was like a drill sergeant's wake-up call, and while Sarah fussed in the bathroom, I went to the garage and smeared dark grease from the lawnmower on her car seat. After she sat on it, people might think she had an embarrassing accident on the way to work, this time in a literal, not figurative sense. Her mood was as venomous as the night before. I even dabbed some grease on the skirt she'd worn the day before to make sure someone else would be to blame for the mess. Sarah's assistant, Linda, married to a friend of mine, called to tell me how Sarah discovered her stained skirt at work. She said Hurricane Sarah was in full force, and everyone was on edge. Over the next few days, I decided to ease up on the pranks. But small inconveniences started to happen on their own. One of her diamond earrings vanished from the table. A wine stain appeared on the dress she'd worn last Tuesday, though she didn't remember spilling anything. The lining of her favorite shoes began to peel. Since I knew where she kept her password book, several sites she used started rejecting her logins, and when she drove her Lexus, she'd hear a bearing ball rolling around in the door whenever she braked or turned. Every day brought a minor mishap. For her, it was like a slow bleed, and I'd say we were about halfway through. The real test came on Tuesday. She came home after work, changed for another bachelorette party, and didn't say a word to any of us. She locked the bathroom door while she got ready, and just like the last Tuesday, I noticed the wet enema tip again. But this time, I tracked her movements using the locator on her phone. Her first stop was Bonefish Grill. Then she headed to O'Hara's dance bar. I wasn't interested in what she did at the club, only in who she'd leave with. I'd been watching from home, so once I saw her next stop, I drove to O'Hara's to wait. Finishing my coffee in the parking lot, I watched her walk out with a man, hand in hand. They hugged, shared a long kiss, and then got into separate cars. I followed for a block before letting the locator take over. They ended up at a Motel 6 near the highway. From the street, I could see them enter a room with an outside door. Knowing they'd be there a while, I pulled into the lot and jotted down her boyfriend's car details: make, model, and license plate. Then I let some air out of his front tire, just enough to trip the low-pressure alert, and smeared grease on the windshield. I knew the first thing she'd do was turn on the wipers, which would smear the whole window. The next day would be interesting. I'd finally be able to hear what was captured on the voice recorder I'd hidden in her purse. After 1 a.m., she slipped into bed after a quick bathroom stop. She hadn't touched her phone or alarm, so it seemed like my plan was working. When she was asleep, I got up, retrieved the recorder from her purse, and plugged it into my laptop to charge while I downloaded the audio. The next morning, with the house empty, I listened to it. Though the dinner and club were noisy, the recorder captured enough. At Motel 6, I found out her boyfriend's name was Keith, and they were both having a great time. I learned they met up every Tuesday night and spent every other Thursday at the Hyatt during work hours. It was Sarah's turn to book the Hyatt, and they laughed about the conservative bank president's unwitting support for their antics. They even charged their luxury Hyatt encounters to their corporate cards. Since the bank's headquarters was near the Hyatt, it made for a convenient meeting spot when out-of-town staff visited. "So, when do you plan to divorce your little accountant husband?" Keith asked. Sarah laughed. "After Miranda heads to college, I love my girls, but I don't want to spend my best years shuttling to their soccer games. He's a great mom and keeps them busy, which gives me more time here with you. I don't know why, but I can't stand being around him anymore. I tried to motivate him, but he's content being an average guy with no ambition. He's wasting his life. If you're so fed up with him, why not divorce now? You'd get alimony and more time with me, Keith suggested. She giggled. Even with alimony, I'd still have to pay for daycare, a maid, and a cook. Right now, he does it all for free and deposits into our account, and I get to stash part of my salary elsewhere hidden for when I do leave. Keith chuckled. When are you going to leave your frigate wife? She asked him. That date's set, he replied. Her father made me sign a prenup with a 20-year limit. In 3 years, I'll get half her multi-million-dollar stock portfolio. Sarah laughed. Perfect timing. Your prenup ends around when Miranda leaves for college. Then we can both walk away. After hearing their conversation, I was stunned by how selfish and deceitful they were. Honestly, they deserved each other. With both of them trying to manipulate each other financially and otherwise, they were in for a rough time. They were cautious about being caught, rotating who booked the Hyatt hotel room each week, so neither rented more than once a month. Sarah would check the tires and ensure the garage door opened before she left. Yet, her disrespectful behavior toward me and the girls was still obvious. As expected, the test results confirmed biological traces on her underwear. I now had enough evidence to contact my lawyer, Jeff Green, and start the divorce proceedings, requesting full custody of the girls since I was their primary caregiver. Given their mom's actions, I doubted they'd even want to see her. Jeff warned me, I'll add it, but it won't be easy. I proposed a settlement where we'd split the house 50-50ths until it sold after both girls left for college. We'd each keep our separate investments and retirement accounts. With my income structured to match hers, neither of us would pay child support, though she'd still owe childcare contributions, including for college. We'd saved enough to cover tuition, housing, books, and food, but not for extras. As she moved into a full-time VP role, Sarah signed up for the bank's deferred compensation program. I decided to leave that account alone in case she tried to come after my business investments. I'd have leverage with her deferred pay. Preparing for the divorce, I began moving important items into storage and backing up my computer files daily to an external drive. While I hoped to keep the house, I wasn't sure how she'd react when served. On my lawyer's advice, I also hired a private investigator to find out more about Keith, providing the license plate number to speed up the search. Every year, the bank's senior management holds a formal dinner and dance at the Hyatt Hotel after the annual budget review. This black tie event for executives and their spouses includes hotel bookings for many attendees. Sarah had told me about it years ago, but by the time she joined senior management, she'd already decided I wasn't worthy to attend. She would frequently bring it up, saying that if I'd been more successful, I might have made it there myself. But I had grown tired of these people. I kept searching her closets and drawers for more evidence of her infidelity. A week before the event, I found a shoebox shoved in the back corner of her closet. I always searched those far corners first. Inside was a pair of elegant Jimmy Choo shoes, no receipt attached. I looked them up and couldn't believe it. Over $1,000. With the event coming up, I decided to have some fun with this. Instead of swapping them with an old pair of yard boots or Crocs, I took the heels to the workshop and carefully twisted each one a few degrees in a vise. Then I rewrapped the shoes and put them back. Since finding her brown box, I'd learned a lot about handling delicate items. The day before the celebration, the investigator called me into his office. He told me that her lover, Keith Miller, was a senior loan officer at Sarah's bank. This could have serious career consequences, since her main role involved ensuring compliance in the credit department, and the bank had a strict no fraternization policy. They were skating on thin ice. Excellent, I said. And could you set up some cameras at the senior management dinner at the Hyatt on Friday night? Since he already had a photo of Sarah, I asked him to capture footage of her walking and dancing. He was glad for the additional job, and I looked forward to having more concrete evidence. What I saw that Friday night was priceless. The investigator and I couldn't stop laughing. Sarah was stumbling around with the shifted heels forcing her legs outward and causing her to sway. She bumped into tables and knocked over 2 bottles of red wine. I might even send it to America's Funniest Videos if Sarah signs the release. Naturally, she and Keith later disappeared into his room, where they spent the night together. Everything was documented with a tiny camera slipped under the hotel door. It's incredible how much technology can enhance our lives these days. Sarah came home before noon on Saturday, but stayed hidden until late Sunday morning. She should have gone to church that morning, but she skipped it. On Wednesday afternoons, she often came home from work exhausted, likely due to her late classes. After her Tuesday night outings, she'd head straight for a bath. This Wednesday, however, I decided to mess with her hot water. She mumbled a hello as she headed to the bathroom, barely acknowledging me. I waited as she adjusted the tap for her bath. When I heard the sink running, signaling she was washing up, I slipped into the utility room. Each faucet in our house has its own water line, regulated by a wall-mounted manifold. I quickly turned off the hot water line to the bathroom, leaving only cold water to fill the tub. Once the water stopped, I turned the hot water back on. Moments later, I heard a shriek as she lowered herself into the icy bath, bubbles making it slippery. She floundered, grabbing at the walls for support. I rushed in to help, but she had already ripped the towel rack off the wall. Trying not to laugh, I helped her out, trembling, soaked, and furious. She slapped me, complaining about the hot water outage. The girls ran in only to find their mother raging, undressed, and furious. Sarah turned on them, yelling, "This is all your fault! You used up all the hot water! I couldn't even relax because of you! Damn you!" She stormed off to the bedroom, and the girls, shaken, began crying. They tried to tell her they hadn't used any hot water, but she shouted, "Quiet! I don't want to hear your excuses! Get out of my sight!" They ran off, crying. I hadn't expected her to turn on them like that. I misjudged how far her anger would spread. She then turned her fury on me. "What are you staring at, you fool? Fix my bathtub. Do you even know how to do anything right in my house?" I led her to the bathroom and turned the hot water back on, sprinkling some on her hand to prove it was working. I stared at her silently for a few seconds, then left to take the girls out to dinner. Forget about the meal I'd been making. As we drove, I pulled over a few blocks away to comfort the girls, who were still in tears. I told them, "I'm so sorry you had to go through that. You don't deserve it. You're wonderful girls, and I'm so proud of you. Please forgive your mother and forgive me for letting this happen." They seemed reassured, and it reminded me to be careful about how I distanced us from Sarah. Even though I was enjoying getting back at her, the girls' well-being was my priority. By the time we got back, it was already late, so I left the kitchen as it was and lay down on the sofa. In the middle of the night, I sensed a presence. It was Sarah, standing over me. "Yes?" I muttered, startled. She just stood there before finally speaking. I shouldn't have yelled at the girls. It wasn't their fault. I probably just turned the wrong knob. Over the past month, she explained, she'd been feeling overwhelmed and frustrated about so many things. Flat tires, garage doors, ruined shoes, each minor inconvenience pushing her over the edge. I need to get my life back on track. With that, she turned and went back upstairs. And that was all she said. The following week, I got an unexpected offer. One of my investment partners had a 2-bedroom apartment in Breckenridge, Colorado, available to rent at half price. It was for the week between Christmas and New Year, and the previous tenants had backed out. I told him I'd get back to him. The girls were still shaken from their mother's outburst, and though Sarah had apologized, her words lingered. When I asked them if they'd like to join me for a ski week in Breckenridge, they practically tackled me with hugs and kisses. I booked tickets for the 4 of us, hoping to give Sarah one last chance to mend our family. I paid extra to keep the tickets refundable just in case. Later, when Sarah was back downstairs, cleaned up and ready for dinner, I had one of the girls ask if she'd like to join us on the ski trip. They chose Hannah, as she could barely contain her excitement and would have spilled the surprise anyway. Hannah said, "Mom, Dad rented a 2-bedroom condo in Breckenridge for the week between Christmas and New Year. Could you find some time to come with us? It'll be so much fun." Sarah smiled, ready to respond, but then paused, lost in thought about something I couldn't quite read. Then she raised her eyebrows with a slight smirk. "I'd love to, honey, but it's year-end at the bank and it's crucial that everything balances properly on December 31st. I really have to stay in town. I'm so sorry." I felt sorry, too. Sorry that Hannah's excitement was met with a weak excuse. The compliance department has nothing to do with the year-end balance sheet. You don't need to be an accountant to know that. Her smirk told me she saw this as her chance to spend a week with that guy, Keith, right in our home. The next week, my private investigator set up the house cameras to stream over Wi-Fi, giving me remote access from Colorado. I wasn't interested in watching the 2 of them together. I had a different scene in mind. Before we left for Colorado, I applied jalapeno pepper juice to her enema tip. If she wanted hot fun, she'd get it. Sarah played the pleasant mother at the airport, saying, "Be careful," and giving the girls a short hug and me a quick peck. I told her, "I love you, Sarah," and got a quick, "Love you too." The flight and drive to the condo went smoothly. The girls, who had never seen the Rocky Mountains, went straight out onto the deck to take in the pine-scented air. Meanwhile, I set up my computer and connected to the Wi-Fi cameras at home. Right on time, Sarah arrived at 6 p.m. and went to the main bathroom for her usual routine. I didn't need a camera in the bedroom. I wasn't interested in their personal physical moments. I had views of the landing, living room, and kitchen. Suddenly, Sarah stumbled down the stairs, screeching in pain. Apparently, she'd discovered that her life-saving tube of Preparation H was also tainted with jalapeno juice. Her face was flushed, contorted in agony. I bet my investigator would have enjoyed seeing that. I wondered how long it would take her to recover, and if it might ruin their plans for the week. Too bad for them. That evening, the girls and I went to Breckenridge's beautifully decorated downtown, covered in a fresh foot of snow, to grab some pizza. As we were heading back to the condo, the girls heard music and traced it to a nearby teen club, a place for kids to hang out while parents relaxed elsewhere. "Dad," Hannah asked, "could we go in for a few minutes?" I agreed. They'd been through a lot recently and deserved some fun. The club was lively, with a packed dance floor and lots of laughter. The girls wanted to stay, so I found a table near the edge of the room and asked them to check in with me now and then. This was perfect. I could catch up on emails while keeping an eye on them. It didn't take long before the girls were dancing, laughing, and chatting with some boys. Now and then they'd look over, and I'd raise my Diet Coke to signal everything was fine. Several other parents were scattered around the room, and one mom across the dance floor caught my eye. She was very attractive, and as we both scanned the crowd for our kids, our eyes met, and we exchanged a smile. She had 2 sons who periodically came over for money or snacks. My girls seemed to spend more time near her table as the night went on. After I finished my messages, I looked up and saw her walking toward me. She caught the attention of others as she moved through the crowd. She was wearing slim-fitting ski pants that seemed to cling, showing her shape, with a snug sweater that somehow made her look even warmer than the freezing temperature outside. Stopping at my table, she smiled. "You must be Hannah and Miranda's dad. Why not come join us instead of sitting here alone?" I answered with a grin, trying not to seem too eager. "My girls seem to be great at finding the right people to hang out with. I'm Paul, by the way." "Donna," she said with a smile. "And those are my sons, Zach and Michael. They're 16 and 14, practically counting down the days until they're 21. "Funny, my girls are the same ages," I replied, chuckling. "What a coincidence." She smiled, adding, "In the time I've been watching your girls interact with mine, I have to say, they're sweet kids. You should be proud." "Thank you," I said, nodding. "And your boys seem well behaved. Though maybe that's because they're under your watch." Donna laughed. "You're observant! I work from home, so I'm the one who sends them off in the morning and greets them when they get back. They're my priority these days." For both Donna's family and ours, it was our first day in Breckenridge. The 4 teenagers quickly made plans for when and where they'd ski. Donna and I coordinated so we'd have separate times to celebrate with them. The plan was to see the kids off in the morning, then enjoy breakfast and spend the rest of the day skiing together. Over the week, Donna and I got to know each other well, and we liked what we discovered. I shared my struggles with Sarah and my plan to divorce her, though I kept the details about securing custody for the girls to myself. While I didn't feel great about it, I knew it was best for my daughters to be with me rather than with someone as selfish as Sarah. Donna shared that she'd been widowed 2 years ago after her husband was eliminated by a drunk driver. We both struggled with forgiving people who had disrupted our lives, and having someone who understood made a difference. On our last evening, Donna and I went to dinner without the teens, spending the final half hour of the night making out on the couch after they'd gone to bed. By week's end, we both realized we wanted to see more of each other. The kids were equally enthusiastic, and I knew it was time to finalize my marriage's end with Sarah. When we returned home, Sarah looked worn and drained. She probably should have come to Colorado with us. We'd had a fantastic time since our first night watching my hot wife on camera, though I lost interest in keeping tabs on her antics. I told Jeff, my lawyer, to finalize and file the divorce papers. The girls took the news about the divorce as expected. They had witnessed the breakdown between me and Sarah over the last 6 months, and they could see the contrast between my interactions with Donna and the tension with their mom. Hannah voiced the big question. "What happens to Miranda and me? Where will we live?" I hugged them both, saying, "You two have always been my world, and that will never change. I've asked for full custody so we can stay together in this house. You'll keep going to the same school, stay with your friends, and I'll still be here for you every day. You'll be able to see your mom whenever you want." I continued, "You'll have a choice during the proceedings about who you want to live with. The parent who gets custody will keep the house until you're both in college, but that's entirely your choice. Remember, regardless of where you decide to stay, both your mom and I love you. You'll have plenty of time to think about it before making a decision. Now, take my car and go out for dinner while your mom and I talk. You don't need to be here for this conversation." Once the girls were gone, I checked my phone to see multiple missed calls and messages. I suspected who they were from and decided to call Sarah back. She didn't bother with a greeting, launching straight into a string of curses that could have melted my phone. I let her vent until she was out of breath. Finally, she demanded, "Why? Why did you do this? Why don't you love me after everything I've done for you and the girls?" I replied, "Why don't you come here so we can talk about it?" All I heard was a click. She was on her way. Within minutes, she stormed through the door, shouting, "Why?" I calmly answered, "You've been cheating on me with Keith Miller every Tuesday night. I'm not sure for how long. What did you expect would happen? I gave you a chance to start fresh with a family trip to Colorado, but you chose Keith over us. That was your choice, and now there are consequences. Pack whatever you need and find a hotel while we sort this out. I'm not about to throw your things in the yard. Today, you're welcome to see the girls whenever, but once you're settled in a hotel, find a lawyer and review my divorce offer. It's fair. From now on, we'll only be in touch to coordinate visits with the girls or your belongings. There's nothing else to discuss." I went to my office, closed the door, and listened to her angrily slamming suitcases. What I didn't hear was any crying, which was telling. I knew I'd never want to be with her again, and apparently she felt the same. Next on my list was changing the locks and updating all security codes. Sarah's rage continued through the divorce proceedings. It wasn't that she wanted to reconcile or save the family. She was furious because she didn't get to file first. She wanted everyone to think she'd left the weak accountant rather than me leaving her for cheating. To her, the real humiliation was that I had filed for divorce first, which struck a professional blow to her pride. Neither of us had any interest in attending marriage counseling. We were completely done with each other. All the good memories we'd shared had long since faded. I felt fortunate to move forward with the divorce, unlike many others who are stuck. First, Hannah and Miranda chose to live with me, staying in our house. They saw their mother only once every week or two and disliked how she would ask about me and whether I missed her. I had minimal contact with Sarah, often avoiding being around when she picked up or dropped off the girls. Sarah had such a strong dislike for me and my small accounting firm that she wanted nothing to do with it. Instead, she kept her 401k and deferred compensation funds, assuming I didn't know about them. She also had to cover childcare costs, and her bank's health insurance plan was better than mine. I kept my knowledge about her Hyatt rendezvous under wraps, saving it for possible use later. She took any furniture she considered stylish, leaving the rest for me and the girls. She also left behind all family photos, as if we would treat them like shrines to her. I was sure she had other hidden funds, but I didn't care. My focus was on my children and my business. Anything related to her was secondary. Someone anonymously sent videos of her and Keith to Keith's wife, which led to a spike in legal fees citywide. They moved into a posh apartment in an upscale part of town, and I wondered how their relationship would fare beyond their escapades. After the divorce, I invited Donna and her boys to spend the weekend with us. We didn't engage in anything beyond kissing and hugging, setting an example for the kids. She was the perfect antidote to the bitterness left by my marriage. Both of us knew our relationship was headed somewhere serious. Donna had her own place, but we were mindful, especially with two 16-year-olds who enjoyed each other's company and had adjoining rooms. They kept us vigilant. Donna, a registered nurse, worked remotely for a health insurance company, handling medical claims. I set up a dedicated office for her in my home. A year later, I reached out to a friend at a CPA firm that audited banks, sharing a story about two senior employees using company cards for personal meetups during work hours. He thanked me for the tip, and after an audit, he brought the issue to the bank president. The bank chose not to file a public fraud case, but both Sarah and Keith were fired. The bank then informed its insurance provider of the theft, leading the bond company to pursue damages from them. Sarah and Keith were essentially blacklisted from working together in banking nationwide. They also lost part of their retirement savings and had to leave their upscale apartment. Now the bond company is suing them for bank credit card fraud. Keith's financial troubles were compounded by his divorce, which meant his wife and kids would take a large portion of his future income. It's unfortunate he didn't wait for his prenuptial agreement to kick in. Sarah now works as a paralegal at a divorce law firm. She's well-versed in the legal and social impact of divorce and provides helpful guidance to her clients. But after a day of advising others, she returns to her modest apartment, reflecting on the tragic end of her own marriage. She doesn't seem to be interested in the successful businessmen and doctors she once thought she deserved instead of me. By year's end, the market value of my once worthless investments had grown to over $2 million. It's shaping up to be a great year, especially with my wedding to Donna planned for mid-June. Reflecting on my journey, I realize how profoundly my life has shifted, shaped by both the trials and the unexpected gifts that emerged through these years. I've walked through betrayal and manipulation, once bound to a marriage that crumbled under the weight of neglect, dishonesty, and selfish choices. In that shadowed chapter, I fought to hold on to my family, believing love and dedication could mend the fractures in my relationship with Sarah. But as her actions and distance deepened, it became clear that the woman I had devoted myself to was no longer the same person I once cherished. The unraveling of my marriage was not only about her deception, but a gradual awakening within me. I had built a life centered on stability and security, values I held dear as a husband and father. Yet, these very traits were the ones Sarah grew to resent. She desired something different, an image of success and glamour that didn't align with the family-centered, modest life I valued. For years, I tried to ignore the signs, believing that hard work, loyalty, and communication could bring us back together. But the cracks in our foundation had spread too deep, and eventually, her disregard for our family's well-being became impossible to overlook. When the truth finally surfaced, her deceit, the secret life she lived behind the facade of our marriage, I was torn between the rage of betrayal and the grief of losing the life I had envisioned for our daughters and myself. Every decision I made thereafter was driven by a desire to protect Hannah and Miranda, to ensure they wouldn't suffer for the choices their mother had made. Navigating the divorce and custody battles was grueling, a process that required strategy and resolve. But ultimately, the truth was on my side. The courts recognized my commitment to our daughters, awarding me custody and granting us the stability we needed to rebuild. In the aftermath of that storm, Donna entered my life. At first, I was cautious, hesitant to open myself up after the devastation I had endured. But Donna's presence was different. She didn't judge my past or diminish my experiences. She was a reminder that kindness and integrity still exist, a warmth that cut through the walls I had unknowingly built around my heart. Donna didn't come into my life to fix me or heal my wounds. She simply walked beside me, her companionship and honesty allowing me to find peace on my own terms. Our relationship developed with a blend of friendship and understanding, a stark contrast to the tense, fractured dynamic I had known with Sarah. Donna understood the challenges of single parenthood, as she too had faced her own heartaches. Her empathy and strength taught me the value of finding a partner who stands as an equal, someone who believes in the same foundation of trust and respect. She brought joy back into my life, and in her, I discovered the beauty of genuine partnership, something I hadn't realized I was missing all those years. Together, Donna and I have built a life filled with laughter, mutual support, and a shared vision for the future. Our children, bonded through this journey, have grown resilient and compassionate, having witnessed what it means to prioritize family and love over ego and resentment. My daughters, once caught in the crossfire of their mother's bitterness, now flourish in an environment where they know they are cherished, protected, and supported. They've seen the importance of integrity and learned that relationships require nurturing, respect, and honesty to thrive. Looking back, I am both humbled and proud. Life has taught me the value of standing firm in my principles, even when it means walking away from something once held dear. The trials I faced were painful, but they revealed my strength and resilience. I know now that happiness isn't simply given. It's cultivated through patience, trust, and the courage to pursue what truly matters. With Donna, I have a partner who values these same qualities, who brings peace and joy not only to me, but to my daughters as well. She is more than just a companion. She is a true partner, someone I look forward to sharing every part of my life with. As I prepare for my upcoming wedding to Donna, I feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. I am grateful for the second chance at love, for the opportunity to build a family grounded in trust, and for the lessons learned from a painful past. I know this new chapter is a gift, one that I will cherish and honor with the same commitment I've shown my daughters. The future I once feared, filled with uncertainty and regret, has transformed into a life rich with promise and peace. To those who have walked through betrayal and heartache, I hope my story offers a reminder that brighter days await. There is life after pain, and though the journey may be difficult, it is worth every step. We have the power to rebuild, to find joy again, and to embrace a future defined by hope and love. With Donna by my side, I'm entering this next chapter with an open heart, eager to continue building a life filled with laughter, compassion, and resilience. It's not the life I had originally imagined, but in so many ways, it's better. The happiness I feel now is deeper, rooted in the knowledge that I've earned it, and I'm ready to live fully in the peace and joy we have all fought to achieve.